Hello everyone, this is Fanfic Audiobook. Here you find original fan made audio stories.
Comprehensive comic. Descendants of Lucifer in High School DxD. Part 3. The answer is simple, he can't win. Once Levi activates his Sin Devil trigger, his combat power directly skyrockets to the Dragon God class. Even in his peak state, Solomon could at most just go toe-to-toe with a war god from an ordinary pantheon. Tiamat, the fiercest among the Dragon Kings and the first sequence of the Satan class, is around that level. Even that level, like Graphia, might be overestimating him. As for Godia, that guy filled in all of Solomon's shortcomings and could indeed touch the threshold of a main god, and he could also brush against the heavenly dragon class and transcendent class. But that was about it. Compared to a monster like Levi who, upon activating his Sin Devil trigger, directly stepped into the Dragon God class, he was simply not worth mentioning. However, there was one thing Solomon did quite ruthlessly. That was his research on the 72 pillars. The 72 pillars demon families carry immense weight within the demon race. Although not all of them, the strongest among the non-pillar families is just the Lucifuge branch. The 72 pillars are the true pillars of support beneath the four great Satans. It's even more exaggerated now, even the four great Satans are selected from the 72 pillars. To put it plainly, the 72 pillars are the absolute ceiling of the demon world. The problem, however, is that even members of the 72 pillars, even the four great Satans at their peak, or even the three current demon transcendents, can at most only utilize the power of one pillar. Not to mention those with mixed blood. For instance, Sears X relies on the power of destruction of the great King Baal to reach the transcendent class. His sister Rias also has quite a talent in this regard. But what about Solomon? This guy can simultaneously wield the power of all 72 pillars. Although there is only enough of each pillar's power for him to use a tiny bit, he forced these powers together, coordinating and amplifying them, creating a composite spell of astonishing power. This data is what Levi truly wanted. However, what Levi wanted wasn't Solomon's spell itself. So that's how it is. A demon's power entirely depends on their bloodline. The fact that Solomon could simultaneously borrow the power of the 72 pillars ultimately proves that the bloodline path is viable. The power of each of the 72 pillars that Solomon channeled was extremely limited. In the eyes of demons, those pillar spirits were no different from weakling familiars. But those powers were the genuine power of the 72 pillars. The secret lay in the bloodline. Solomon obtained the direct bloodlines of the 72 pillars and then refined them into the 72 pillars. They were useless on their own, but once combined, the power was terrifyingly absurd. Presumably, the demons saw through this, which is why they looked down upon Solomon's research. Levi knew very clearly that people from pure-blooded families would never lower themselves to engage in bloodline modification. After all, who would be stupid enough to mix their noble lineage with inferior mixed blood? Furthermore, they wouldn't waste precious bloodline power to create such pathetically weak familiars. But Levi was different. He curled his lips and whispered to himself, "I have a devil trigger." As long as he gathered enough of the various bloodlines, he could use Solomon's spell to fuse all the power of the 72 pillars into his heart. To put it simply, it meant turning his heart into something akin to a noble phantasm. Other demons would never dare to play like this. They don't have the third magic and cannot materialize the soul. If something went wrong with the bloodline, at best their cultivation would be ruined, and at worst, they would lose their lives. Even if they were lucky enough to succeed, the gains would be pitiful, nothing more than 72 essentially useless abilities. They might look diverse, but none of them are actually effective, and they would have to take such a huge risk. But Levi is a magician of the third magic. As long as he prepares properly in advance, bloodline fusion can be performed entirely at the soul level for him, and then rematerialized onto his physical body. There is simply no risk. This guy added. Besides, as long as I activate my devil trigger, the bloodline can be completely released. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, his eyes gleaming. When that time comes, I will be able to obtain the full power of the 72 pillars and become the strongest ultimate demon. Satan. No, perhaps I could be directly titled a demon god. Levi stared at the pages, his mind racing. He even pondered whether he could also acquire the bloodlines of the four great Satans and those non-pillar families. Right now, just with the Sin Devil trigger, his combat power has already reached the Dragon God class. Once this power system is completely finished, then he can make a move on the X-world. However, the Key of Solomon only wrote about the 72 pillars. The method of utilizing each bloodline is different, and it didn't mention other bloodlines at all. The only relevant point was the Lucifer bloodline that Levi already possessed. The book said it could be used to mark himself and make familiars obedient. He isn't into the familiar business, so this information is useless to him. Besides, he already had the Lucifer bloodline. After thinking for a while, he shook his head. Other Satans, non-pillar families, and other racial bloodlines, let's put them aside for now. Let's start with the 72 pillars. He set a small goal. Let me become the strongest demon first. Although it seems I already am, he muttered in a low voice, his tone tinged with a bit of smugness. After clearing his thoughts, Levi directly used his observation hockey to sense the auras and walked out of the luxurious penthouse suite on the top floor of the hotel. Following the stairs, he walked into the living room. Sure enough, all his servants were there. The Holy Grail War had completely ended. But after Graphia explained the situation, Levi frowned. Two things surprised him. The first thing was, Saju Ayaka really said that. The sound of water came from the direction of the bathroom, intermittent. Saju Ayaka had already left. She continued on her own journey. Graphia recounted exactly what Saju Ayaka's attitude was when facing them, as well as the message she asked her to deliver before leaving. Lord Levi, she asked me to tell you, looking forward to seeing you again next time. This. Could she have taken a liking to me? For someone like Levi whose emotional intelligence has never been particularly sharp, it was quite an achievement to even have such a thought. But this couldn't be blamed on him. Whenever he thought of Saju Ayaka, his mind was filled with this, followed immediately by the image of her being backstabbed by Old Saber. But there is no Old Saber in this world. So, has she changed her target to me? But judging from her attitude of leaving while I was unconscious, it doesn't seem like it. Forget it. If he couldn't figure it out, he wouldn't think about it for now. Levi cleared his mind, his attention turning to the sound of running water faintly coming from the bathroom. Is the person taking a bath in there really Artoria herself? Yes, Lord Levi. Graphia's answer left Levi even more confused. He originally thought that since the Holy Grail War had ended and he had been unconscious, Artoria should have already returned, but it seemed she hadn't left. Then, listening to the sound of water, Levi raised an eyebrow. He did indeed want Artoria to become his knight. For this, he even kept those 2 knight pieces. But what he wanted was not Artoria in her current form. His original plan was to first make contact with her in this state, and then, as much as possible, reincarnate the one who possessed the Holy Spear and was more fully developed. The reason? Of course, because she was stronger while wielding the Holy Spear. What else could it be for? Lord Levi, Artoria's situation seems to be related to you. Kuroka scratched her head. She was very skilled in senjutsu, and her sensory abilities were not comparable to those of ordinary demons. Therefore, she could detect the abnormalities in Artoria. Artoria already felt different from the other heroic spirits to me, NYA. But after you defeated Solomon and the Holy Grail merged into your body, the feeling she gave me became even weirder. Also, your command spell should still be there, right? When Kuroka said this, Levi raised his hand to check, and the command spell was indeed still there. Thinking along with Kuroka's words, he vaguely had a guess. Could it be related to the wish he made, or was it because of the third magic? He could feel his magic power seemingly connected to something. He would consume magic power here, and it would be immediately replenished there. This is what is called infinite magic power. The Holy Grail itself couldn't do this. The magic power accumulated inside over hundreds of years was, in the end, just a prototype of the third magic created by the Einsborn family, by the people of the generation of the Saint of Winter, hundreds of years ago. That prototype was made into a cup, and later, the old bug of the Meitu family, before he became the ghost-like creature he is now, brought the Holy Grail to Fuyuki City. For the next few hundred years, the Holy Grail kept accumulating magic power. Once the magic power had accumulated enough, the old bug, together with the Einsborn family, consulted with the local families in charge of the territory, and then, in order to fully realize the third magic, they organized this Holy Grail War. Therefore, the magic power in the Holy Grail must be finite. It's hard to say how much was consumed just in this war, and for it to keep supplying me, that's not realistic. In other words, the only one who could do this is if I myself have already obtained the third magic. So, what about Artoria? Was she affected by the third magic because she has a connection with me? If he had to find an explanation, this was all Levi could think of. As he was turning this thought over, Ingvild spoke up from the side. Artoria's current appearance is too different from before. I think you need to see it with your own eyes to understand why we were so surprised. At that time, Sakura and Rin's eyes were almost popping out, and even now, they are still half doubting, wondering if that person's identity was mistaken. Hearing this, Kuroka hugged Sharon, one hand rubbing her head as if petting a cat. Our Sharon is amazing, Nya tilde she recognized that it was Artoria at a glance. Sister. Sharon was a little embarrassed. Levi glanced at Kuroka subtly. Others might not know, but he knew clearly. Sharon had already started learning Senjutsu. Senjutsu's strength lies in its perception, so the way Kuroka and Sharon recognize people is different from others. At most, the third magic changed the nature of Artoria's existence, but the person hadn't changed, so naturally, they wouldn't misidentify her. But Sharon's face was flushed, and she was looking at him with eyes full of expectation, so Levi could only smile and nod at her. Yes, Sharon is very amazing. Yes. Seeing Sharon's happy expression, Levi smiled too. He scanned the surroundings and finally asked Ingvild, who had mentioned Sakura and Rin just now. Where did Sakura and Rin go? Irisville isn't here either. Through the pieces, he could feel that Sakura was safe, and the contract side also knew that Rin was still alive, but the two were indeed not in this room. After listening, Ingvild blinked those orange eyes. Ingvild continued, before, when you went berserk, you burned down the entire Einsborn family's base. Irisville is now considered the nominal heir of their family, so the officials specifically called her in for questioning. As for Sakura and Rin, before he could finish his sentence, Levi caught a glimpse of black smoke drifting from the kitchen of the hotel suite. He instinctively swept the area with his observation haki. Good grief, those two sisters were indeed causing trouble in there. They were probably trying to make something to eat. Levi remembered clearly that in the original work, neither of them had such atrocious cooking skills. How could they manage to fill the kitchen with smoke now? But he didn't have time to think about that right now. Graphia, Levi said, turning his head, buy this hotel in the name of the Lucifer clan. Understood, Levi-sama. Levi had read plenty of anime and novels, and people with terrible cooking skills could easily blow up an entire kitchen. To avoid causing trouble for the hotel, he simply had Graphia buy it outright. Money. That was never an issue. Devils were never short on money, especially someone like him who belonged to a Mao family before the reforms succeeded. His wealth was piled as high as a mountain. Let alone a hotel, he had more than enough to buy an entire city. After Graphia went to handle the matter, Kuroka returned to her room, cradling a soundly sleeping and smiling Sharon in her arms. Levi and Ingvild exchanged a glance and headed toward the kitchen together. Both of them were quite curious. They both wanted to see what kind of antics the two Tasaka sisters were up to in there. Besides, they wouldn't actually blow it up, would they? Upon entering the kitchen, the two first saw the ingredients neatly arranged on the counter. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. The problem was that Rin and Sakura were staring at the electronic oven that had already started smoking, completely dumbfounded. You too. Levi had just started to speak when he suddenly remembered a certain trait of Tasaka Rin. She wasn't very compatible with electronic devices. But how could one possibly end up using an electronic oven like this? Wait, Levi, it's not what you think. Tasaka Rin hurriedly explained. I just saw the oven was broken and wanted to fix it with magecraft. Believe me, with my level of magecraft, I can fix it in no time. As she spoke, she aimed one hand at the oven. A beam of red light shot out from her palm. With a bang, the oven door was smashed flat. Ingvild and Levi were stunned simultaneously. Immediately after, Ingvild covered her mouth, her face turning bright red as she held back laughter, tears almost streaming down. Ingvild stared at the smoking oven, her mouth twitching. Even someone like her, who had been asleep for over 100 years, could figure out how to use this thing. After all, it was foolproof, fully automatic, you just had to press a button. To be able to break it, that was a skill in itself. So, Ingvild turned her face to look at Tasaka Rin. Why would you think that using offensive magecraft could fix a broken item? Upon hearing this, Tasaka Rin immediately turned around, gesturing wildly. Well, my school classmates said that if old electrical appliances don't work, just give them a couple of whacks and they'll be fine. I kicked it earlier, but there was no reaction, and then it started smoking. I thought the force wasn't enough, so I tried using more powerful magecraft. So, Tasaka Rin wanted to continue explaining. Sakura reached out and patted her shoulder. Oni-sama, stop. Tasaka Rin immediately wilted, her twin tails drooping, her head hanging so low it was almost buried in her chest. Anyway, I'm really sorry. Levi sighed, not knowing what to say. He walked over to the oven and took a look. Tasaka Rin curiously leaned in. Levi grabbed the broken door and ripped it right off. Ah, you. Tasaka Rin was startled. Ingvild and Sakura were also stunned, wanting to see what Levi was going to do. Levi first checked the inside of the oven and found no issues. Then he aimed one hand at the oven. A pitch-black magic circle appeared, inscribed with the crest of the Lucifer clan. The magic circle enveloped the entire damaged oven. Third magic, activate. Projection. Soul materialization, completion. Black light burst from the magic circle, condensing into a phantom image of an oven door in midair. Just like 3D printing, the phantom image was filled in bit by bit. Finally, it became a real door, fitting perfectly onto the oven. Levi threw away the broken door and used magical power to clear away the surrounding black smoke and smell. He pressed the start button. Beep. The oven lit up again. Levi stood up. All right, it's fixed. But if you don't know how to use it, let Sakura handle it. I intended to have you as a maid, but since you can't even use a machine, I have no expectations of you learning. Sigh, I found such a clumsy maid. Tasaka Rin watched Levi sigh, initially still shocked by his magecraft of creating things out of thin air. The next second, she bristled. Tasaka Rin widened her eyes, her voice rising several octaves. Huh. Are you picking a fight with me? Electronic devices, if I put my mind to learning them, there's nothing I can't master. Levi's eyes drifted away, not daring to meet her gaze. No. I didn't mean it like that. I just think people always have things they are good at and things they aren't. Cough. No, it's just that our household doesn't really need so many appliances, no need to go through all that trouble. This perfunctory attitude of his only made Tasaka Rin more infuriated. What is this kind of gentleness supposed to be? He just had to play the nice guy in this kind of situation. She was about to retort, but Artoria's voice suddenly came from the kitchen doorway. What happened? Do you need my help? No need. Levi instinctively wanted to take over the conversation, taking the opportunity to divert Tasaka Rin's attention away from the appliance. But when he saw Artoria clearly, he was stunned. It wasn't a combat situation, and she wasn't wearing that conceptual armor. Perhaps because she had just finished bathing, Artoria was dressed very casually. A black tight-fitting shirt on top, a short skirt on the bottom, paired with black stockings. She was using a towel to dry her hair, a movement that outlined her figure completely. If it were the Artoria from before, under her armor she would probably be as flat as a steel plate, with no curves to speak of. But now she had grown up. Levi was stunned, then realized Artoria had changed completely. She was taller, her face more mature, her hair longer, and her body had curves. If he had to say, the previous version of her had her body permanently frozen in the appearance of a young girl because she had pulled out the holy sword. And the current her was Artoria, who had pulled out the holy spear, her body no longer fixed. She saw Levi staring at her, blinked, then realized and smiled at him. You're surprised, aren't you? I'm not entirely sure of the reason myself. After the Holy Grail War ended, I didn't seem to leave directly, and my body underwent some changes. But none of that is important. No. This is clearly the most important part. Tasaka Rin and Sakura stared at Artoria's chest, both silently refuting her words in their hearts. Artoria herself clearly didn't care about these things at all. Seeing that Levi was awake, her expression became slightly more serious. By the way, Master. Since we won the Holy Grail War, I should be able to make my wish, right? As for the fact that she hadn't left this world, she hadn't given it a second thought. Artoria didn't really care about this change. She only had one thing on her mind. Could she fulfill her wish now? The Holy Grail of this world was, in essence, the prototype of the third magic. It wasn't like the Holy Grail in FZ or FSN, which had long been polluted beyond recognition. This was the heaven's feel in the true sense, capable of granting the vast majority of wishes. As long as one followed the normal path, if the old director wished for money or resources, the Holy Grail would grant it to him. If Solomon wanted to become an ordinary person, the Holy Grail would also respond to him. These were all within the scope of miracles the third magic could create. Honestly, this scope was ridiculously large. Magecraft was the limit that humanity could touch through wisdom. Magic, however, was something that jumped out of all of this, standing alone outside the heavens. The initial first changed everything, the subsequent second acknowledged more, the inheriting third displayed the future, the guarding fourth hid itself, and thus, the final fifth no longer had any meaning. Even within the circle of magicians, some had said, wouldn't it have been better if it had ended back at the third? In fact, the third magic was indeed an end point in a certain sense. The miracles it created were too numerous to count. But, you might be disappointed this time. Levi, having become the third magician, knew better than anyone. The third magic was not merely soul materialization. It was an extremely mysterious power, not some technique or spell. But Artoria's wish. Can even the Holy Grail not do it? I just wanted to return to the moment before my death. Not to change my own destiny, just simply to select a successor. For me, is even that too extravagant? Artoria lowered her head, her fists clenched tightly. Levi looked at her and couldn't help but sigh. He had only just started, and the other party had already thought of so much. It seemed Artoria herself hadn't pinned all her hopes on the Holy Grail. Perhaps she just wanted to tell herself, I must do something, which is why she crossed eras to compete with various heroes. It was all for that faint possibility that even she didn't believe could be realized. Even if it really succeeded, the wish she wanted to achieve was so small that it would be overlooked if one didn't look closely. But even so, it still couldn't be done. Artoria said to herself in her heart. From the era she lived into now, history had always been rolling forward, only moving forward, never retreating. No one could swing a weapon, turn around, and fight history forcing it to run backward. It had always been like this. Things done were set in stone. Things not done were also left there. No one could change these things. Including himself. Disappointed. Perhaps. But compared to disappointment, what was more painful was the hatred for her own incompetence. If she hadn't left so many regrets back then, all the messy things that happened later would never have occurred. Thinking of this, Artoria clenched her fists even tighter. Levi didn't speak. He picked up his teacup and took a sip, leaving her some time to calm down. Until she raised her head again, wanting to say something, did Levi slowly put down his cup. I didn't say your wish was completely hopeless. I just didn't want you to have too much hope. Huh. Artoria was stunned, looking up at Levi. She couldn't understand why Levi said that. Levi pointed at her. Artoria, haven't you felt at all strange about the changes in your body? Speaking of this, he shook his head gently. You don't think that the wish I made to the Holy Grail was just to have you stay, and incidentally grow into the form that better suits my aesthetic, do you? As soon as Levi said this, someone hiding in the shadows couldn't help but let out a muffled grunt. Besides, you all saw it earlier, the Holy Grail is indeed gone. But it didn't disappear because I played any tricks, it vanished because it fulfilled your wish and mine, and having no further need to exist, it dissipated. This sentence left Artoria even more bewildered. Both of them had their wishes fulfilled. But you don't remember making a wish, do you? Don't doubt it, you really shouldn't have those memories. The only proof that you made a wish is the change in your body. It's normal that you don't remember. At first, Levi thought Artoria remained in the current world because he had integrated the third magic. That mysterious power had blended into his magic, influencing her as a heroic spirit and preventing her from disappearing. But once Levi saw Artoria's changes with his own eyes, he understood, that kind of influence alone couldn't possibly achieve this. Others might not be able to tell. But since Levi was still her master, and having become a magician and read the Key of Solomon, he was perfectly clear about Artoria's current state. The reason she had grown up was because the throne had already been abdicated. After losing the Sword of Selection and the status of the Eternal King, Artoria's figure naturally reverted. Just like the version of her holding the Holy Spear, she had finally transformed into a form that matched her true age. But things were not that simple. Your wish was indeed fulfilled, but human order will not easily change the trajectory currently developing on our timeline just because of your single wish. Artoria frowned, completely unable to understand what Levi was talking about. Levi continued, shattering her confusion directly. You used the Holy Grail, made a wish, and returned to the moment before you breathed your last. You passed down the throne and the Sword of Selection. Everything you did at that node and all the changes you triggered were stripped away from our original world. That timeline will not become the past of our world. Not even you yourself will retain any memories or influence from it. But another world line has indeed completely changed because of your decision. Believe it or not, it's up to you. You are no longer King Arthur. Isn't the change in your own body the best proof? Or rather, do you still have that Sword of Selection now? Artoria was stunned. She couldn't prove what Levi said was true. She couldn't grasp her own state either. Excalibur was still there, she could draw it whenever she wanted. The scabbard was there too. Only the Sword of Selection was missing. That sword that had long since broken. Now, if she wanted to prove anything, she had nothing to produce. Should she believe it? But it was too illusory, completely lacking a sense of reality. Or, not believe it. But Levi didn't look like he was lying to her. As soon as this thought emerged, she remembered the words Levi said at the very beginning. You might be disappointed this time. For a moment, Artoria fell into a trance, unable to distinguish the difference between believing and not believing. Stay by yourself for a while. Levi left her space and time to slowly struggle with this question. He turned and walked over to the group, ushering them all away. Kuroka and Sharon were still upstairs. Irisville hadn't returned yet. Even Graphia, who had bought the entire shop, had already returned. Master Levi, what you just said to Artoria. Sakura spoke softly. The others also looked over. Levi looked at Sakura with some amusement. Are you referring to the aesthetic issue I mentioned? No, that's not it. Sakura's face turned bright red instantly. Rin's face turned just as red. They were the only two who would be particularly concerned about such things. Graphia looked at Levi, her tone probing. I understand what everyone wants to ask. What I am about to say, although speculative, is likely the judgment closest to the truth. Otherwise, her current condition simply cannot be explained by conventional logic, nor could it be caused solely by a change in my magic. She paused, glancing sideways at the room Artoria had returned to, her attention returning to Levi. Then, Master Levi, is there no way to confirm it? When Levi heard her ask this, the old guy from the clock tower immediately popped into his mind, Zelrech. If he were to intervene, verifying whether his guess was accurate would be like child's play. There is a way. But the next second, his tone changed. But if we really checked, the result probably isn't what she wants to hear. Rin had wanted to ask more, but hearing this, she froze. Ingvild watched Levi's expression quietly, and in a daze, she remembered the moment she first woke up. At that time, Levi looked at her bewildered and fearful eyes with exactly this expression. You all need to understand one thing first. Levi's voice sank. Changing the past will only result in two outcomes. The first is that the era will become a fixed singularity, and the world will deploy heroic spirits to that point to try and force history back on track. The second is, just as I said, the problem becomes so severe that even heroic spirits cannot fix it. Then this era will completely detach from the main trunk and grow into an entirely new world line. He paused. But this wasn't a good result. And it didn't mean they had won. Rather, the era that becomes a singularity eventually evolves into something called a lost belt. Some lost belts might be better off than us, with more advanced technology, and might have even progressed further along the timeline. But in the end, it is destined to perish. Without the fantasy tree to support it, a lost belt cannot act against pan-human history. The more this is the case, the more irreversible the destruction of the lost belt becomes. In other words, Levi turned around, his gaze landing on Artoria's bedroom door, his eyes becoming deep and somber. The path she chose is likely not as correct as she thinks. Instead, she's poked an even bigger hole, pushing the entire situation in a direction that cannot be cleaned up. No matter which path is taken, it's a dead end in the end. Since that's the case, it's better to let her remain confused. At least, the unknown, besides making people afraid, also leaves people with a bit of hope. Finishing this, Levi withdrew his gaze and walked toward his room. This is my own decision. I don't like finding excuses like, it's all for your own good. To put it bluntly, I just can't stand watching such tragedies happen before my eyes. So I've made this decision arbitrarily, but I don't intend to change my mind. That's it. After saying this, Levi turned and returned to his room. In fact, it wasn't just Artoria who needed to slow down, he himself needed to calm down. If things developed for the better, then going with the flow to keep Artoria, and ideally having her transform into his subordinate, would naturally lead to a happy ending. But what if things didn't go so smoothly? Levi sat at the desk and opened the Key of Solomon. In the past, he hadn't had the slightest interest in the 1,500 types of cosmic technologies recorded inside. But now it was different. He had to study it seriously. That person Artoria, once she gets stuck in a rut and commits to a path, she will never turn back. If she insists on finding that answer, then he must prepare means to solve the problem in advance. Thinking of this, Levi rubbed his temples and sighed. Who told me to choose her as my subordinate? If she really stays stubborn to the end, I'm going to have my hands full. The room was pitch black in the dead of night. Artoria curled up in the corner, the curtains drawn tight, the entire room as dark as an abyss. The only light came from a blue magic circle floating in front of her. The magic circle repeatedly played the words Levi had just said, its faint glow reflecting in her pupils. Single quote. That's it. The voice echoed in the room. Footsteps suddenly came from outside the door, followed by Graphia's voice. Master Levi is just that kind of person. He always worries about details that others don't notice. Although he is a devil, he can't change his nature deep down. Artoria, you are not the kind of person who would be easily defeated, right? Now you should understand too, no matter how you view us, Master Levi has already treated you as one of his own. I let you listen to this recording not to make you feel bad, nor to make you feel like you are a burden to others. Master Levi is probably still pondering how to handle this matter more properly. So I hope you give yourself an answer tonight. If you are willing to accept all of this, Master Levi will definitely be very happy. But even if you choose not to accept it and insist on seeing it for yourself, we will face it together with you. If you also consider us companions, then think it over carefully, and like a knight, tell us your decision honorably. Graphia's footsteps gradually faded away. Artoria heard it clearly. She knew the other party had left. The magic circle in front of her dissipated bit by bit, and after the reflection vanished, it revealed her eyes. There was no fluctuation in them, but if one looked closely, a trace of hesitation was hidden within. Just as Graphia said, Artoria was never a weak person. Back then, she was King Arthur, much tougher than the so-called strong people many had seen. How could someone who could carry 1,000-pound burden be easily defeated? Therefore, the hesitation in her eyes became less and less. In the end, only determination remained. Artoria already had the answer in her heart. She leaned against the wall, feeling the presence of the others in the suite. Although they were all devils, at this moment, she actually felt particularly reassured. Companions, huh? Thanks. Graphia, who had been observing in the dark, curled the corner of her mouth slightly. On the other side, Levi was flipping through the Key of Solomon when a system notification suddenly sounded in his mind. Sign in reward, Artoria, Instinct, A. Bonus enhancement. Observation Hockey significantly enhanced. Bonus enhancement. Having received the reward, Levi didn't rush to study it. He just sighed softly, but the corners of his mouth turned up. So fast. It must have been Graphia's doing. As expected of my person, truly reassuring. So, Artoria, how will you choose? The next morning, Levi and the others appeared in the living room on time. For devils, the night is the proper time for activities. During the day, they usually keep the curtains drawn and rarely wander around. But today, not a single one was absent. Even Kuroka and Sharon, who didn't know what had happened last night, were sitting there after hearing Graphia's explanation. Speaking of Artoria, to be honest, in the beginning, Kuroka especially had complicated feelings about her. A devil and a holy sword wielder. That combination just didn't feel right. At the time, Kuroka couldn't understand why Levi thought someone like Artoria could become one of their own, let alone reincarnate as a devil. But after spending more time together, well, it's hard not to like this person. Although Artoria is King Arthur and holds a holy sword, her attitude toward devils isn't actually that rigid. After signing a contract with Levi and becoming a temporary teammate, she never really considered devils to be some kind of alien species. As long as it didn't cross her bottom line, Artoria could basically accept anything. As long as you explained the cause and effect clearly, she would nod. When a fight broke out, she would even charge to the front. Even with devils all around her, she was used to standing in front to protect them. Why did they consider her one of their own? Well, perhaps it's because she was the one who treated them as her own people first. So, Lord Levi, if Artoria really wants to go and see for herself, how do you plan to handle it? As Kuroka asked this, Levi smiled. Don't think of me as so simple, I've already made up my mind. But if she really intends to go, we need to prepare some things in advance. Levi said, crossing his arms and leaning back on the sofa. I've already asked Graphia to arrange the specific items, but it will take some time. Honestly, I have a rough idea of what she will choose. After finishing, he looked at Graphia, who had just returned after leaving early in the morning. Thank you for your hard work, Graphia. There have been so many things lately, if it weren't for you, I really wouldn't be able to handle it all alone. It's nothing major. As your queen, it is only right for me to share some of the workload for you. You're truly reliable. Levi chatted casually with Graphia. Kuroka sat opposite them, watching the scene, her eyes darting around as she pondered something. Compared to Sakura and Sharon, Ingvild's gaze also flickered between Graphia and Levi, and her resolve solidified. Unlike Sakura, who had reincarnated from a human, and the young Sharon, Kuroka and Ingvild were very clear about what was going on. Kuroka was a genius among Nekomata, and having undergone the artificial transcendent experiments, her strength had been steadily rising during this period. She had long since reached the level of an ultimate class devil, all she lacked was the accumulation of magic power. As long as she had enough magic power, she would be a definite Satan class. She had enough potential to reach Graphia's height. If given more time and a few good opportunities, it wasn't impossible for her to become a transcendent. Of course, opportunities don't just appear out of thin air. Isn't Graphia still stuck at that level herself? As for Ingvild, her current magic power level was already at the Satan class. According to Graphia, the quality of her magic power was even a cut above the average Satan class. After Ingvild merged with the power of the original Satan Leviathan, it was as if she had found the most suitable vessel. When she first woke up and hadn't fully recovered, she already possessed the strength of an ultimate class devil. Coincidentally, that was the highest level of servant that Levi could convert at the time. About a week later, once she had recovered, Ingvild directly stepped into the Satan class. You have to realize, she knew absolutely nothing about these things before. Graphia personally taught her, she slowly mastered her sacred gear, and her power skyrocketed. Now, she and Kuroka were on completely different paths. Kuroka's situation was, once enough power was accumulated, she would naturally become stronger. While Ingvild was the exact opposite. As long as she understood how to use her power, becoming stronger was a natural progression. Graphia, Kuroka, and Ingvild, these three were top-tier characters among the queen pieces in the original work. Now that they were all Levi's servants, they would sooner or later shine brilliantly. By comparison, Sakura and Sharon seemed less eye-catching. Kuroka and Ingvild watched as Graphia had already begun to help Levi, while they still couldn't contribute anything. They bottled up their determination, thinking they had to work hard to catch up. After all, the day when they could truly help Levi was right around the corner, they just needed that final push. Just as Kuroka and Ingvild were each calculating their own plans, Artoria walked down from upstairs. As she stepped down the stairs, everyone in the room instinctively turned their gazes toward her. Then, as if afraid of crowding her, they all scattered away. Artoria looked at this group of people, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. If one were to say that when she first met them, she had felt like she had fallen into a demon's den. Now she just wanted to say that it was truly wonderful to have met such great companions. Or rather, she had never been unlucky in life. Those by her side had always been the best of companions. Since that was the case. Levi, everyone, I have made up my mind. Perhaps this decision will make me suffer for a while, and it might cause trouble for everyone. But if I can, I still want to see for myself, my choices, my decisions, and the path I have insisted on all these years, what it really is. Hearing her say this, Levi seemed to have expected it. Won't you regret it? Perhaps. Artoria finished, smiling gently. But there are some things, even if you will regret them or feel sad, that you must face. Because only by enduring the regret and the sorrow will you welcome a true tomorrow. Levi looked at her, saying nothing more. Levi withdrew his gaze first, casually pulling out the small box from his system space, opening the lid, and placing the two knight pieces in his palm. All right, I understand your intention. I will help you with this, so let's sign a new contract. Artoria had long known about the evil pieces. She stared at the two pieces in Levi's hand, knowing clearly that as long as she nodded, she would have to live as a devil from now on. In the past, she wouldn't have been able to accept it at all. But now, she didn't hesitate, nodded, and reached out to take the pieces. The light dispersed, melting into her body like shattered sunlight. She clearly felt a strange power explode throughout her limbs and bones, and her back suddenly grew hot. Jet black wings burst out from behind the holy sword wielder. Levi watched this scene, his mouth curling upward. Then, welcome to my, Levi Lucifer's, group of servants, Artoria. She looked at him and smiled too. All right, then please let me reintroduce myself. I, Artoria Pendragon, from today on, place this sword in your hands and obey your will. Please treat me well from now on, Master. Levi sprawled on the sofa in the first floor hall, looking up at the large castle with its heavy underworld style, and let out a long sigh. It really feels like I haven't been back in a long time, though it's only been a few days. After returning, he walked around upstairs and downstairs, finally curling up on the sofa, his heart filled with a sense of security. This is the territory of the House of Lucifer. Tasaka Rin, Irisville, and Artoria were visiting the castle for the first time. Kuroka, Sharon, and Sakura led them around, while Grafia took the opportunity to arrange the rooms properly. Then, Rin, Irisville, since you two have become maids of the House of Lucifer, you must follow the rules and be maids who do not lack in etiquette. Grafia's tone was not relaxed at all. She felt that the maids represented the face of the House of Lucifer. If any mistakes were made, the whole family would lose face, so this aspect had to be strictly monitored. Levi, however, didn't take this seriously at all. But, by the way, Irisville, later you should set up the great Hakare barrier that Grafia improved around the residence, and the supervision of the territory will be handed over to you. After finishing, he turned back to Grafia. The things I asked you to prepare on your way back, are they ready? They are ready. Grafia nodded, channeled her magic power, and a huge blue magic circle immediately lit up on the ground. Row after row of Einsborn homunculus maids in neat uniforms marched out from the formation in an orderly fashion. Irisville, the Einsborn technology is basically all on our side now, and I don't intend to waste such results. You will temporarily serve as the main control tower for these homunculus maids. Later, I will contact Amagus and ask her for a certain technique. If all goes well, your consciousness will be able to be shared among these homunculi, and you can even freely switch bodies. Although you bear the title of maid, what you will be responsible for in the future is the security work of the Lucifer clan, including the Great Hakare Barrier and the command of the homunculus troops. All of this is entrusted to you. Valley and Risvam, one after the other, had basically taken away all the active forces of the Lucifer clan. It wasn't that Levi hadn't thought about recruiting some capable devils to fill the gap in security. But there were only so many devils in the underworld. Although Searsex trusted him, the other Satans couldn't just sit by and watch the Lucifer clan recruit troops on a grand scale. Since that was the case, the Einsborn homunculus technology came in handy. This type of homunculus already had the combat power to fight against magical beasts, and in terms of strength, they were a cut above the average familiar. Levi reinforced them again with the third magic, and combined with some technical additions provided by Grafia, he finally raised the combat power of these homunculi to the level of a combat-ready low-class devil. With enough numbers piled up, it was barely enough. All right, I understand. Irisville didn't expect Levi to entrust her with such an important job, but after thinking it over carefully and confirming that she could do it, she nodded seriously. Seeing her agree, Levi turned his gaze to Tasaka Rin. He didn't just casually recruit Irisville and Tasaka Rin to be maids. These three main maids of the Lucifer clan each had a clear division of labor. The security of the residents now had a framework. What Tasaka Rin was responsible for was another area. Rin, one of the reasons I recruited you into the Lucifer clan as a maid is to have you be responsible for the communication work between the human world and the underworld. You will act as the liaison between the two worlds, becoming the spokesperson for the Lucifer clan at the Magus Association. Irisviel will be responsible for the residents' affairs here in the underworld. If you two split these two areas, Graphia can stay by my side and help me handle other matters. However, with your current abilities, you are still far from being able to do this. For this period, you will first work alongside Graphia, watch more, learn more. Can you do that? As soon as Levi said this, Tasaka Rin's expression immediately became serious. From the moment she signed the contract, she had already prepared herself. Moreover, Levi had always been quite polite to her. Although it was a master-servant relationship, he had never used his status to pressure her, and now he was entrusting such an important matter to her. She staked the reputation of the Tasaka family on it and would absolutely not let him down. Watching her posture, Levi secretly sighed in his heart. If only Tasaka Rin could resolve that knot in her heart that she had never been able to figure out on her own. Otherwise, when would he ever be able to get the login reward from her? Don't put too much pressure on yourself. This is our first time dealing with the human world, and your father, Tasaka Tokiomi, is in charge over there. I have some things to discuss with him later, so you can take this opportunity to get some practice. Understood. Once Levi had arranged matters for Irisviel and Tasaka Rin, Graphia took the two of them and left. After they left, Levi turned his gaze toward Artoria. If you want to see the consequences of the decision you made, you'll have to wait. It will take at least a month. I estimate the preparations will be finished by then. Going directly to find the second magician was not very reliable. There was no telling what kind of trouble that bunch would stir up, so Levi decided to do it himself. He read the Key of Solomon over and over again, and finally made up his mind. He would build an Ark of Noah himself. He would modify this ship to be able to travel through time and space, just like Valley's team in the original work, wandering around in the gaps of the world. Combined with Spiritron transfer technology and Sheba, as long as nothing went wrong, this thing would be able to take Artoria to a parallel world to see what was going on. I'm not in a hurry. Artoria smiled and nodded at Levi. Levi shifted his gaze to the remaining servants. Kuroka, Sharon will be under your care for this period. You are currently in a stage where you need to accumulate magic power, and since you're idle anyway, take this time to teach Sharon Senjutsu. Sure, Nya tilde. Kuroka and Sharon had no objections. Finally, it was Ingvild and Sakura's turn. Ingvild didn't need to worry. Her path had been set since birth, and one could say her future was the clearest of everyone's. But Sakura was a bit panicked. After all, Levi's other servants were either powerful to begin with or had a path to becoming stronger. Even Sharon was learning Senjutsu. Only she couldn't see which direction she should be exerting effort in. Ingvild blinked her orange eyes, quickly dashed to the front of the group, turned around, and stared at Levi, asking. Levi, did you call Sakura and me out separately because there's something up? Levi smiled and nodded. There is indeed something. That Longinus of yours can control dragons, and its control has already reached the level of a high-tier Longinus. Didn't you say you could use it before? I happen to need that power this time. You want to deal with dragons? Yes. Levi took Ingvild and Sakura and used teleportation magic to head straight for the familiar forest. Half of his goal this time was the strongest of the 5 great dragon kings who had been living in the familiar forest for some time, the Chaos Karma Dragon, Tiamat. As for the other half of the goal, Levi glanced at Sakura, who had been keeping her head down, walked over to her, and flicked her on the forehead. Ouch! Sakura cried out, covered her forehead with both hands, and tilted her head to look at him with teary eyes. Lord Levi, what's wrong? Looking at this girl who was still acting all soft and weak, Levi sighed softly. Didn't I tell you before? Don't keep things bottled up. Seeing Sakura still stuttering, Levi scratched his head and said it directly. My trip to the familiar forest this time is half for the Chaos Karma Dragon, Tiamat, and the other half is to find you a familiar. Sakura was stunned. Although she had spent 10 years in the underworld as a slave, she still knew about familiars for devils. But, Lord Levi, are you only bringing Ingvild and me to catch a familiar? Levi nodded. For now, yes. In the raiding game of devils, the use of familiars is heavily restricted. The familiars that ordinary devils sign are basically not for combat, and large familiars are hard to house, and summoning incantations have distance restrictions, so familiars have very little impact on the battles of ordinary devils. Hearing Levi say this, Sakura wanted to lower her head again. Levi raised his hand to flick her again, and Sakura quickly covered her head and took half a step back, not daring to lower her head anymore. Levi looked at her appearance and sighed. Sakura kept her head down, her voice a bit muffled. I always feel like I'm not good enough. Levi interrupted her. Didn't I tell you before? Ordinary devils cannot possibly improve their combat power by relying on familiars. But you are different, Sakura, you were born different from others. Different. Sakura tilted her head, her eyes full of confusion. She really didn't feel that way herself. Usually, small animals didn't get close to her, so Levi's words completely baffled her. Levi simply laid it out. Every magus has an attribute. I used 3 whole evil pieces to recruit you as a servant. The reason you needed 3 pieces to reincarnate is because of your magical attribute. Sakura's attribute is imaginary. Without being tampered with by that old worm, and without the absorption characteristics of water, it was purely imaginary. It sounds mysterious, but to put it plainly, it means being able to connect to the imaginary space through the power of a magus. To put it even simpler, it's equivalent to a portable storage space. Levi continued, Sakura, your talent in this area is much stronger than you imagine. Don't feel like you're weak. Even if you can't trust yourself, you have to trust my judgment. He smiled. I have never misjudged a person. I originally wanted to reincarnate a pure human servant, and the moment I saw you, I was certain. Sakura's nose felt sore, and her eyes grew a bit hot. Ingvild leaned in to tease. Levi, why don't you tell us why you just had to choose her? Sakura also looked up, waiting for the answer. Levi glanced at the two and shook his head. If I had to say, it's the familiar and the Longinus. Sakura's attribute is special, and she will be able to act together with you, Ingvild, in the future. This way, your Longinus can be utilized better, and she can also protect you, the songstress, up close. After saying this, he strode forward. Sakura and Ingvild stood where they were, looked at each other, and neither fully understood. But seeing Levi walking away, the two quickly chased after him. Hey, wait for me. Lord Levi, please slow down. Levi heard the shouts from behind and the corners of his mouth curled up. This trip to the familiar forest was primarily for Tiamat. Regardless of whether that went smoothly or not, he definitely had to take care of the other matter. Going to the familiar forest to sign a contract with a familiar. No. He simply made his point clear. He was going there to snatch one. This was Sakura's first time in such a place, and logically speaking, she should have someone to guide her. But Levi didn't bother looking for a guide at all. He opened a portal directly, stepped into the familiar forest, and immediately spread his enhanced observation haki across the entire forest. Almost instantly, he locked onto the target's location. Found Tiamat. Let's go. Levi started walking, with Ingvild and Sakura following behind him. On the way, he chatted casually with Sakura. Sakura, I remember Graphia taught you magic before. Do you remember what she taught you back then? When Sakura and Ingvild were first reincarnated, Graphia was the one who took care of them. It was also at that time that Levi discovered Sakura's magical attribute was almost ready to be used. It's just that he never found the opportunity to discuss it with her in detail. Now that the Holy Grail War was over and he had nothing else on hand, he simply brought Sakura to the familiar forest. I remember. Upon hearing this, Sakura nodded quickly. She brought her hands together in front of her chest, and a small black magic circle appeared, inscribed with the crest of the House of Lucifer. Then she pushed the magic circle forward, and a large magic circle with a radius of more than 3 meters immediately unfolded in midair. Is it like this, Lord Levi? Levi looked at it and nodded. Reach your hand over, pour your magic power into it, and try to activate it according to the fourth type of spell operation method Graphia taught you. Okay. Sakura walked up to the magic circle and did as he said. The next second, the magic circle in front of her was like a door pushed open from the middle, the circle patterns dispersing to the sides, revealing a pitch-black opening that led to who knows where. Seeing this door, Levi smiled. This is the usage of that imaginary, magic attribute of yours, and only you can do it. You haven't mastered it very well yet, but since you've reincarnated as a devil, the magic power given to you by the pieces is far stronger than that of a human magus, so some simple usages can actually produce quite brute force effects. For example, this door in front of you. A door. Sakura and Ingvild didn't understand. Levi continued smiling. That's right, a door. This opening connects to the imaginary space. As long as you pass through it, you enter the imaginary space. For the first time, a smile appeared on Sakura's face. So that's how it is. With this spell, I can be Ingvild's portable warehouse in the future, and even hold everyone's things. She had finally found her value. Levi looked at her and shook his head somewhat helplessly. This girl, she's too easily satisfied. If she really wants to be happy, at least wait until I get that Longinus. That spatial spell has a special feature. It is not interfered with by time or space. It is more than enough to load large familiars, or even an entire group of familiars. That's not all. If it is loaded with seawater or a group of dragons, it would definitely be a huge boost to Ingvild's Longinus. Ingvild's Longinus has the ability to control the ocean and the dragon race. In this world, 70% is ocean, and the dragon race holds terrifying power, so this ability is undoubtedly top tier. But it cannot be denied that it also has flaws. Controlling the ocean is easier to talk about. The current Mal Leviathan, Seraphal Leviathan, has strength on par with Graphia. That magical girl can freeze an entire country with a casual strike. As long as she gets a little serious, releasing a cold current that affects the continental plates is not a problem at all. In other words, Ingvild doesn't need to stand by the sea to control the ocean at all. Standing on land is enough. She doesn't even need to reach the level of a transcendent. As long as she reaches Seraphal's level, she could submerge an entire continent with a wave of her hand. Soaring in the sky with a group of dragons, taking away all the land. It is precisely because of this terrifying ability that the moment her Longinus was discovered, it was directly classified as a high-tier Longinus. Although it has a certain specificity, as long as it is in a place where she can exert her power, the strength is truly terrifying. The only drawback is that it is not flexible. When controlling the ocean on a large scale, fine control is lost. If there is no group of dragons around, the ability to control the dragon race can only become suppressing the enemy or strengthening one's own side. As for the rest, it might only be able to rely on the magic characteristics of Leviathan. That is why Levi said that equipping Ingvild with a portable backpack like Sakura would significantly increase her strength. Generally speaking, things involving dragons rarely end well. But there are always exceptions. Some people think dragons are trouble, while a bunch of idiots believe that if they just slaughter a dragon, they can gain wealth, fame, and power. They want it all. The massive dragon head slowly lifted from the ground. A breath smelling of sulfur swept across the land, like a gust of hot wind. The purple-black magic dragon stared at Levi, and two red lights suddenly ignited in its pupils. So, although no one has dared to do this for many years, are you people of this generation the new idiots? Tiamat's voice turned cold instantly. As one of the 5 great dragon kings beneath the heavenly dragons, Tiamat's fame is actually not as loud as the other 4. But the leaders of the major factions all know in their hearts that this dragon is actually the strongest among the 5. Levi had also read about this setting when he read the original work. He also knew that Tiamat was considered an anomaly among the dragon race. This guy seems to have seen through everything in the world. Although her strength has touched the edge of a heavenly dragon, she never interferes in the messy business of any faction, always living a carefree and unburdened life. And then Levi came to disturb her. It's hard to say whether I count as an idiot, but by your standards, that's certainly the case. Even the ideas I brought, in your eyes, are probably even more outrageous than the actions of those hopeful fools. Speaking of this, Levi smiled. He piqued Tiamat's curiosity, then looked straight into her eyes and spoke directly. Tiamat, are you willing to become my servant? Quit talking nonsense. The breath, which was originally just like a strong wind, instantly became fierce, sharp, and full of aggression. Levi spread one hand in front of him, a black magic circle blocking his front, protecting Sakura and Ingvild behind him, and blocking the wind pressure sprayed by Tiamat. Kid, you're from the house of Lucifer, right? Your old Satan faction still dares to cause trouble under the noses of those 2 monsters. Save it, I don't get involved in your mess. Levi originally thought Tiamat was going to attack. As it turned out, she didn't move. She just gave a symbolic roar, as if venting her anger, then half closed her eyes, looking like she couldn't be bothered, intending to ignore him and turn back to sleep. Fair enough. Levi was a bit surprised by Tiamat's attitude, but he nodded at this moment. He didn't care at all that she refused. On the contrary, after she refused, Levi smiled even more happily. As soon as Levi finished speaking, Tiamat's eyes, which were about to close, suddenly opened wide. She heard Levi shout, Ingvild, do it. Diodora Astaroth is a relative of the current Beelzebub. He is a devil, and also a severe nun Khan and Saint Khan. His favorite thing to do is to use the kindness of those nuns and saints, get them involved with devils, get them expelled by the church, and then drag them step by step into a trap. What he likes most is watching the faith of saints and nuns collapse and watching them fall. This time is the same. Sigh, I had my eye on a white-haired saint. But that guy seems to be able to sense devils, so it's not easy to make direct contact. Plus, her experience is quite tragic. She didn't even feel sad when her father died, so ordinary methods simply couldn't make her become the way I want to see. Diodora looked down at the familiar master lying in a pool of blood and casually put away the snake he got from the Chaos Brigade. So I thought of another trick, intending to use a familiar to get close to her and slowly drag her down from her position as a saint. But there's a risk in doing this, so I have no choice but to make you shut up forever. He originally, like Levi, wanted to open a teleportation circle directly into the depths of the familiar forest, bypassing the familiar master to avoid leaving any flaws. But he was unlucky and teleported directly in front of the familiar master. Even worse, this familiar master actually knew him. And his strength wasn't weak. Now that he had used the power of the snake, he couldn't leave a living witness. The more he thought about it, the more ruthless he became, and Diodora's smiling eyes grew colder and colder. The familiar master had suffered a fatal wound, but he still crawled to Diodora's feet, looked up, and warned him. No. The familiar forest is really dangerous, you. Bang. Before he could finish, Diodora kicked him in the face. He kicked him flying, then followed up with a green magic bullet, burning the familiar master to ashes. Dangerous. Diodora snorted coldly and turned to walk into the depths of the familiar forest. A bunch of weak familiars, what could possibly be dangerous? As expected, I can never understand what the weak are doing. Ha ha hey hey. Now no one can stop me, Saint, the Saint of Magdalena, Colin. Hee hee, you can hide for a while, but not forever. Sooner or later, you will fall into my hands. If you had been this cooperative earlier, it would have saved everyone some trouble. How nice that would be. Levi lowered his head and patted Tiamat on the head. She was completely paralyzed on the ground, only her eyelids could move, and she didn't even have the strength to struggle. But her gaze was not on Levi at all. She stared fixedly at Ingvild behind Levi. It was just a moment ago, this girl just hummed a song, and she, a whole dragon, lost control, slammed directly onto the ground, and couldn't get up even with all her might. What the hell kind of method is this? It's exactly the same as that dragon eater Samael sealed in the underworld. The suppression effect on dragons is simply outrageous. Levi saw what Tiamat was thinking and sneered. Ingvild's suppression of dragons is no joke. In the original work, even Hyodo Ise, who had activated his dragon deification, couldn't withstand it, let alone you, Tiamat. The strongest dragon king. In the end, it's just a dragon king. Check in target. Subdue Tiamat completed. Check in reward. Noble phantasm sword of blessing of powerlessness, Ascalon. Oh, the sword of blessing of powerlessness, the legendary weapon of St. George. In other words, it's Ascalon. The true form of this dragon-slaying holy sword is in the hands of Michael in heaven, but what the check-in gave is a noble phantasm. To put it simply, it's a kind of ability, a kind of method. Even if Levi is holding Yamato, he can still activate this power. This noble phantasm itself doesn't have a specific killing effect against dragons, but rather serves more to interrupt the opponent's attacks and strengthen one's own slashes. However, it has two particularly deadly uses. First, having obtained this noble phantasm, he is now a legitimate holy sword wielder. Without needing holy sword factors or additional conditions, he can use most holy swords. Second, this noble phantasm can temporarily grant the enemy the attribute of a dragon. It won't affect the opponent's combat power or state, nor will it mess up their sanity. But the problem is, all anti-dragon special attack methods will take effect. For example, the attacks of the dragon eater Samael, or for example, Ingvild's Longinus. It's ironic, this thing was obtained from Tiamat's check-in reward, but the effect is indeed useful. Hey, Tiamat, stop glaring. Without some preparation, would we dare to come directly for you? Tiamat used her remaining strength to roar at Levi. But she still lay on the ground, unable to move. Ingvild's noble phantasm was pressing down on her tightly. That is a divine artifact specifically used to rule over the dragon race, naturally something that restrains dragons. Levi didn't take that low roar seriously at all. He just squatted in front of Tiamat and repeated the sentence he had mentioned when they first met. Now, Tiamat, are you willing to become my servant? Tiamat stared at him. The arrogance in her eyes hadn't diminished one bit. So what if I fell? So what if I can't resist? So what if I'm at a disadvantage? Even if I have to risk everything, even if I have to shamelessly run away, there are some things I absolutely cannot agree to. The dragon race rarely converts into devils. The few exceptional cases in history were either to protect the dragon race or because they acknowledged the other party as a friend. No dragon has ever been forced to reincarnate. Dragons are strong. Dragons are proud. Dragons stand at the top of the world. Therefore, she, Tiamat, will never bow her head on such a matter. Just as she was about to roar again, Levi's voice rang out first. To be honest, I guessed that you probably wouldn't easily give in. But it's not like I must make you my servant. I'm just thinking from the perspective of interests, feeling that this is not a loss for either you or me, a win-win situation. Do you know, Tiamat, I came to the familiar forest, and only half the reason is you. What? Tiamat's pupils shrank. She couldn't guess what Levi meant, but her intuition told her that it wasn't good. The devil stood right in front of her, his mouth slowly curling up, revealing a cold and ruthless smile. Tell me, if news spreads from the three great factions tomorrow that Tiamat, who has long resided in the familiar forest, suddenly went berserk and devoured all the familiars here, do you think they will come to crusade against you? The familiar forest is quite important to the three great factions. Major factions all need to form contracts with familiars. Moreover, this place has never been affected by the flames of war since the end of the ancient war, and it is a rare peaceful buffer zone for the three parties. If all the familiars here were swallowed by Tiamat, she definitely wouldn't have a good ending. As for explaining, hey, no matter what a dragon does, it wouldn't make people feel strange. Moreover, with her status as a dragon king, how could those guys be willing to listen to her explain? Not to mention, the ancestral knowledge of the dragon race doesn't even have the concept of explaining. You can't even find this word in a dragon's brain, let alone understand its meaning. Look at those two guys, the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor, they are the best examples. As long as they were willing to loosen their mouths and fight somewhere else, how would they end up in this state? Most other dragons have the same temperament, stubbornly refusing to bow their heads. Levi's words indeed made Tiamat quiet down. He continued. If you are willing to become my servant, the story will be written like this. You ran into the familiar forest to cause trouble. I stepped forward to beat you back, and finally subdued you. You don't need to worry about what happens next. I have my own ways to smooth things over. But if you refuse, then it can only be that you are doing evil, and I will step forward to be a dragon-slaying hero for once, although I am a devil myself. As soon as these words fell, Tiamat felt that the malice on the other party was almost solidifying. The feeling she had about Levi in her heart was indescribably strange. He was clearly just a high-class devil who wasn't that strong, but she could somehow feel a real, tangible death threat from him. It was as if, as long as he had a single thought, she would die in his hands the next second. To be honest, Tiamat is afraid of death. And, she is probably the one most afraid of death among the dragon race. And precisely because of this, the stronger Levi is, and the more potential he has, the less she dares to agree. Or rather, she didn't dare to nod at all. I don't agree. The moment her voice fell, Levi's eyes suddenly grew cold. His devil transformation instantly covered his body, and Yamato was already in his hand. He had never been a soft-hearted person. Wait. Sensing that bone-chilling killing intent, Tiamat let out a long sigh and spoke again. I think I can explain. I hope you can hear me out. Levi had originally thought Tiamat was the kind of proud dragon who would rather die than submit. If that were the case, he would have just killed her. To eliminate any future trouble. But she actually wanted to explain, and what surprised Levi was, after he drew Yamato, he could clearly feel her fear. The dragon clan actually feared death. This discovery sparked a bit of interest in Levi. He was curious about why Tiamat was afraid of death. He was also curious about why, despite being afraid of death, she still refused him. So, he gave her a chance. Speak. Levi uttered only a single word. Behind him, Sakura and Ingvild also cast their gazes upon Tiamat. Unlike Levi's cold gaze, there was a hint of curiosity in their eyes, which allowed Tiamat to breathe a sigh of relief. This starts with my ability. Devils, have you ever heard of the imaginary number world? As soon as Tiamat spoke, Sakura's interest was piqued. The imaginary number world. Of course she knew about it. Her magical attribute was void, allowing her to open the imaginary space. As long as she became a bit stronger and explored the imaginary space a bit deeper, finding the entrance to the imaginary number world would only be a matter of time. Tiamat was unaware of this. Seeing the understanding expressions on Levi and the others' faces, she continued, my ability is related to the void attribute. I can freely enter and exit the imaginary space. Having lived for so long, I naturally found the gate to the imaginary number world inside it. I am a dragon, and a quite powerful one at that. Back then, I was bold, so I charged straight in, wanting to see what was hidden in the imaginary number world. At this point, the fear on Tiamat's face deepened. I saw a black sea there. Beneath the seawater, a terrifying mass of energy was compressed, shrunk down like a single point. That existence, who knows how many years they had been exiled to the imaginary number world, was completely filled with malice. I attacked back then. But no matter how I attacked, it was useless. The opponent didn't even retaliate, just a strange song and the aura they radiated made me turn and run. Since then, I've become more and more afraid of death. Once you run once, you can run a second time, a third time. A look of helplessness appeared on Tiamat's dragon face. To her, that incident back then was a disaster that had fallen out of nowhere. Afterward, she had also investigated. My name is Tiamat, and she also seems to be called Tiamat. To this day, I still haven't figured out whether she is a god, a dragon, a devil, or something else. But you devils should also know that for existences like us who have lived long enough, names are not chosen lightly, the name itself carries a certain meaning in nature. She is older than I am. I don't know what her true form is, but I have an intuition that the imaginary number world won't be able to trap her for much longer. Once she comes out, I, the Tiamat who was born after she was exiled and forgotten, will definitely become her target. I know this very well. That's why for so many years, I've been hiding, living a low-profile life, not getting involved in anything, and not causing trouble. Because of this, even though I am the strongest of the 5 great dragon kings, fewer and fewer people remember me now. I deliberately let the world forget about me in this way. When that monster breaks out, I can just hide straight in the imaginary space and never come out again. Sakura and Ingvild listened to all this as if it were just a story. Levi pondered for a moment. The Tiamat who hadn't returned from the imaginary number world. If he remembered correctly. If I'm not mistaken, the one trapped in the imaginary space whom you spoke of should be the primordial mother goddess of Mesopotamian mythology. She is one of the 7 evils of humanity, the beast who governs the concept of regression, beast 2. Meeting her, then it wasn't surprising. Although this Tiamat was pitiful, when it came to combat power, the other one was absolutely a monster among monsters. Levi was certain she possessed power within the world's top 5. Whether it was her or Godia, these evils of humanity were at least of the transcendent class at their worst. Their strength was even greater than that of chief gods, ordinary gods were simply no match for them. If a grand heroic spirit with a special blessing didn't take the field, every time such a thing descended, the destruction caused would be catastrophic. Hearing Tiamat say this, Levi sneered. It's a good thing you didn't release her back then, otherwise the 2 of you would likely have been taken care of. Hearing this, Tiamat lowered her head even further. However, I understand your reason. But my stance remains unchanged, and, if you are truly afraid of her, then you should join my peerage even more. Hearing this, Tiamat's eyes were filled with confusion as she stared straight at Levi. Levi didn't explain to her, nor did he display anything. He simply met her gaze and spoke in an undeniable tone, "You cannot deal with her, but I can." If Tiamat were to break out of the imaginary number world, her threat level to this world would actually be far inferior to that of the Beast Emperor. That thing was even more terrifying than an ordinary transcendent. Even after the fusion of the 2 worlds, when Levi recalled some type moon settings, he suspected that the Beast Emperor might also be one of the beasts. Moreover, against a beast, grand heroic spirits would come with special blessings, even sacrificing their grand status at critical moments to help. Even if the Beast Emperor really broke out, at worst, it would just be something that could be killed by spending 10,000 years. If all else failed, Levi still had his Sin Devil trigger. That was his last resort. After all, the current Levi activating his Sin Devil trigger was no longer like before, when he could only sustain it for 40 seconds. Now that he had infinite magical power, trying to exit the berserk state could no longer be solved by simply running out of magic. He had some structural conjectures regarding the spell formulation for this. Although he hadn't fully mastered this power yet, there was already no limit to the duration of its use. It was just that releasing the berserk state was a bit troublesome. But as long as he activated it, let alone the primordial mother goddess in the imaginary number world, even the beast emperor would absolutely die by his hand. Therefore, Tiamat fell silent for a long time. I will only say this one last time. Levi's voice was not heavy, yet it carried an unquestionable pressure. I can handle the thing you fear. Even so, are you still unwilling to become my servant? Tiamat opened her mouth but didn't answer immediately. She was truly wavering. It wasn't that she completely disbelieved that Levi could deal with that monster. But right now, the devil camp had 3 transcendents overseeing it. One of them was even the strongest transcendent of the Lucifer clan. If she really took a gamble. She raised her head, looked at Levi, and finally made up her mind to speak. Just as she started, she was interrupted. Wait a minute. Levi's eyes instantly turned cold. He turned his head to look in the direction the voice came from. Tiamat also glared over with a look of annoyance. Sakura and Ingvild's expressions didn't look very good either. From the bushes of the familiar forest, Diodora walked out with a smile. Levi had actually sensed his presence nearby long ago. He had originally thought that with Tiamat's aura here, this guy would definitely not dare to show his face. But looking at it now, this person was even stupider than he thought. Levi narrowed his eyes. Diodora didn't care about Levi's cold face at all. He looked at him with a grin, his tone carrying a superior air. Levi Lucifer, hand over the dragon behind you. She should be my familiar. Diodora was not a brainless person. In fact, he had more schemes than most devils. When he first entered the familiar forest, he had sensed Tiamat's aura. He knew this dragon's name. But unlike the older generation of devils who knew Tiamat inside out, Diodora's understanding of her was limited to merely knowing there is such a dragon king. One of the 5 great dragon kings. Compared to the other 4, who were either ruthless characters that couldn't be provoked or old antiques that had already been sealed, Tiamat, this dragon king, had been hiding all along and had very little presence. Facing a dragon king of this caliber, Diodora was not panicked at all. This confidence didn't even come from his blood relative, the current Satan Beelzebub, who probably didn't even remember him. Rather, it came from his own strength. Diodora's talent was indeed quite good. As a young generation devil, he had long possessed the strength of an ultimate class devil. Plus the snake he got from the Chaos Brigade. After using the snake, he felt he could fight at a Satan class level. A Dragon King, when converted to the devil's side, was nothing more than a Satan class. That was all there was to it. Why should Diodora hide from a relatively weak Dragon King? He had strolled right over. He had originally just wanted to watch the excitement. As a result, hey, there was actually an unexpected harvest. Seeing 2 female devils standing beside Levi, Diodora was momentarily stunned. He recognized Levi. It should be said that there were few in the underworld who didn't recognize him. From devils to fallen angels, the useless eldest son of the house of Lucifer, this label was stuck fast, and everyone knew it. Clearly of Lucifer's bloodline, and almost an adult, yet his demonic power couldn't even catch up to a middle-class devil. Why on earth could this guy get close to Tiamat? Diodora pondered while continuing to watch. Then he saw Tiamat lying on the ground, completely motionless. Then, this fellow Levi seemed to want to take advantage of her misfortune, and use this opportunity to make some kind of contract with Tiamat. Seeing this, Diodora could no longer sit still. Ha. This opportunity might have belonged to that trash Levi, but now that I've stumbled upon it, the benefits naturally belong to me. Diodora thought to himself. Tiamat must have run into some trouble. Otherwise, how could she be held in the palm of a piece of trash like Levi? As for the 2 female devils behind Levi, Diodora didn't even bat an eye. He wasn't the kind of person who couldn't walk when he saw a woman. He only had designs on holy maidens and nuns. Female devils. Forget it. If they were pure blood devils, he might have taken a look and checked their backgrounds. But these two, one looked like a reincarnated devil, and the other didn't have any pure blood aura on her either. At most, they were just lackeys sent by the old Satan faction. That bunch of guys had long since become outdated. He heard that the strongest among them was only at the level of an ultimate class devil, completely unworthy of his attention. Moreover, pure-blooded devils looking down on reincarnated devils is simply not an issue in the underworld. Therefore, Diodora concluded right from the start that the helpers around Levi could not be that strong. Furthermore, he was already a powerhouse at the Satan class level, someone who could be counted among the notable figures in the entire underworld. Finally, Tiamat had run into trouble. After this series of judgments, he felt confident. So he walked out swaggeringly. Levi Lucifer, hand over that dragon behind you. That is my familiar. As soon as he finished speaking, the few people present were all stunned. Sakura and Ingvild were both dumbfounded. Was this guy who popped out of nowhere mentally ill? Even though Levi had already brought the situation under control, when he extended an invitation to Tiamat, he used the title of servant. A familiar. Compared to a servant who is ostensibly a subordinate, a familiar, hey, that is basically just another word for a slave. Even the existing four great Satans wouldn't dare claim they could take a dragon king as a slave. Then where did you, a small devil who isn't even a Satan, borrow the courage from? Tiamat let out a deafening roar. A violent wind rushed out from behind Levi. Diodora had anticipated this move. He grabbed the snake's body with one hand, black energy surged from his body, and his aura instantly climbed to the Satan class. Tiamat was still being suppressed. This bit of wind pressure was nothing to Diodora. He became even more arrogant. Levi, what are you still standing there for? Get lost immediately. Don't think that just because you are from the house of Lucifer I wouldn't dare touch you. This is not the underworld, nor is it the territory of your old Satan faction. Even if I kill you here, no one will know. Having said this, he added another sentence. Even in the underworld, in your house of Lucifer territory, so what? Your grandfather Rizvam has already run away, so what if I kill a piece of trash like you? After hearing this, Sakura and Ingvild's gazes were as cold as knives, piercing Diodora. But before they could speak, Levi raised his hand to stop them. Seeing Levi's reaction, Diodora laughed out loud. Especially when Levi looked up at him with a smile on his face, Diodora was convinced that this guy was scared. HMPH. Let him off for now. After going back, he would rely on the Dragon King familiar to elevate his status in the underworld, and then he would pin the whole familiar master dead on Levi. Right, the House of Lucifer should still have quite a bit of territory and resources. If played well, these things would also belong to me. Diodora had a bunch of thoughts spinning in his head. He had even planned out what he would do after becoming a Satan. During this time, Levi walked up to him, the smile on his face becoming increasingly brilliant. Diodora, seriously, I really have to thank you. You reminded me that no one knows what happened here. And seeing you being so stupid, I feel especially at ease and especially happy. Diodora nodded at first, but when he realized the meaning behind Levi's words, his expression changed instantly. You. He was about to make a move immediately. But before his hand could be raised, Levi's slap had already landed on his face. A heavy slap sent his head spinning twice. Levi had already entered Devil Trigger. The devil's vitality meant Diodora didn't die immediately. He stared wide-eyed at the Levi before him, feeling that undisguised power, and opened his mouth to say something, but his head had spun a full 2 circles, and he couldn't say a word. He wouldn't live much longer either. Levi looked at Diodora in this state, a smile still hanging on his face. Diodora Astaroth. If I remember correctly, you are a blood relative of the current Satan Beelzebub. Both of you come from the 32nd pillar of Asmodeus, or rather, a branch family of the Asmodeus clan. Levi weighed the bottle in his hand, the corners of his mouth rising slightly. Just in time, I lack an experimental material. The Asmodeus blood is mine, and besides. He waved his hand casually, the movement so fast it was impossible to see clearly. A flash of sword energy swept by, and Diodora's head flew off, rolling onto the ground. Before the corpse could fall, the separation ability of Yamato automatically activated. That pitch-black little snake was forcibly pulled out from the corpse, twisting and struggling in midair. Levi did not change his expression, a roll of magical power directly trapped it tightly. This thing is rare. He narrowed his eyes, staring at the little black snake, his tone revealing a hint of playfulness. Although trying to secretly contact the infinite dragon god by relying on this is impossible. But if it were handed over to Circex, that would definitely be a great achievement. He looked down at the corpse on the ground and scoffed. Thank you, Diodora, for delivering the goods to my door and throwing in your life as well. Meanwhile, Ophis saw everything that happened in the familiar forest. The moment Levi grabbed that snake, her vision was synchronized. When the aura of the third dragon god erupted that day, no one else could find the source. The clues left behind after Levi burned his magical power could not be caught by others. But Ophis was different. The moment her snake touched Levi's magical power, it secretly swallowed a small bit. She licked her lips, expressionlessly savoring the taste. That's right. Found you. As soon as the words fell, she tore open space with her bare hands and stepped into the familiar forest. Trash is always trash. Even if wrapped in a snake, it only makes the trash look a little less like trash. But deep down, trash is still trash. Just like those of the old Satan faction in the original work, after getting the snakes, they all boasted as if they were Satan class. But when they encountered Azazel, they couldn't even take one of his hands. If it weren't for that Leviathan woman's special magical power and the Delphinid dragon being too fierce, they wouldn't have been able to hurt even a finger of Azazel. The remaining few died like stray dogs by the roadside. It was simply a disgrace to the Satan class. Satan class, Dragon King class, seraphs, fallen angels executives, and those top-tier existences in various pantheons. This group of people is basically the ceiling of this world. That small handful at the tip of the pyramid. Not counting the monsters that walk sideways outside the pyramid, they are the strongest. None of them are to be trifled with. Therefore, Diodora became inflated. The heirs of the old Satan faction in the original work also became inflated. Because they felt that by relying on the snakes, they had forcibly stacked themselves up to the Satan class. But the Satan class supported by snakes is simply not the same thing as a legitimate Satan class. This chasm is ridiculously large. Unfortunately, Tiamat did not know these things. It is not yet the later period of the Chaos Brigade. Circex and the others haven't even figured out what the snakes are. Not to mention Tiamat, the veteran Dragon King who has been in seclusion for who knows how many years. So in her eyes, that slap Levi just gave was just him casually slapping a Satan to death. Tiamat was actually still calculating in her heart. What she thought before was that after Levi turned into his current form, that sense of oppression was indeed stronger. But she was Satan class, and she herself was Dragon King class. If they really fought, it wasn't certain who would win or lose. But looking at it now, she, Tiamat, was indeed a little bit stronger than ordinary Satans and ordinary Dragon Kings. Her foundation was similar to Graphia's. As long as she encountered a bit more chance, she could touch the threshold of the heavenly dragon class, which is what the devils call a transcendent. But to ask her to slap a Satan to death with one hand. Even she, whose combat power is considered top tier among the dragon race, couldn't do it. Therefore, when Levi's gaze fell on her again, that heavenly demon Karma dragon, who had once been scared out of her wits by Tiamat in the imaginary number world, immediately began to nod frantically. She had already made up her mind to take a gamble. If Diodora hadn't come out to stir up trouble, she would have already nodded and agreed just now. Now she agreed faster than anyone. Fine. Seeing her nod, Levi took out the box containing the chess pieces. On his chess board, there were still 4 special chess pieces. One was the special pawn used when reincarnating Ingvild, and one was the special bishop used when reincarnating Kuroka Tuju. Of the remaining 2, one was a rook, and the other was another bishop. The benefit of such things as special chess pieces is that no matter how high the other party's potential is or how strong their power is, as long as you can reincarnate them, one chess piece can get it done. Tiamat's strength was similar to Graphia's. Levi was fully qualified to reincarnate her. From the 3 remaining chess pieces on the board, he drew out a rook that had never been used, and the one he took out happened to be that special chess piece. Then, he threw this chess piece at Tiamat. Black flowing light instantly wrapped around her body. She did not resist. Instead, she took the initiative to slowly shrink within that black light. Finally, she shrank to the size of a human, and the pitch-black light completely merged into her body. Red hair, black horns, draped in a dress that looked like a feather garment. This was Tiamat's appearance after turning into human form. Except for the color scheme, I have to say, she really looks somewhat like Tiamat in that person's memory. At this moment, a pair of black bat wings appeared behind her. That was the mark that she had been reincarnated as a devil. Seeing her successful reincarnation, Levi clapped his hands. Congratulations, the second Dragon King to be reincarnated as a devil. The House of Lucifer welcomes you to join. Hearing this, Tiamat sighed helplessly. If she could choose, she really wouldn't want to join. Tiamat was silent for a while, not thinking about it further. Since she had already joined, there was no need to regret. She looked at Levi and nodded. Levi, since you have taken me into your group, if that monster in the imaginary number world really rushes out in the future, will you abandon me? When she spoke, her golden dragon pupils stared at Levi's eyes without blinking. A dragon's insight is very strong. Even if there was a slight change on Levi's face, she could capture it. She was not trying to go back on her word, nor was she trying to rebel. She just wanted to know in advance what kind of ending this choice she made would ultimately lead to. After hearing her words, Levi just hummed softly. He did not say any sweet words, nor did he say anything like, "I will protect you," which Tiamat would never believe. His expression was calm, and he didn't even put that so-called invincible monster in his eyes. Let me abandon my servant. She is not worthy, and no one is worthy. After saying this, Levi turned and walked toward the depths of the familiar forest. Ingvild and Sakura were already used to his style, and without a word, they followed him. Tiamat stood stunned in place for a while. Finally, she smiled, took a step, and followed. Looking at it this way, joining the House of Lucifer's faction seems not bad either. I really want to travel back in time and slap myself from that time. Hurry up and do it. Levi was urging again. But Tiamat delayed in turning back into her dragon form, turned her head, and asked the same question again. Levi, are you sure the 3 factions will let me off after I burn down the familiar forest? Having lived in this forest for so many years, she naturally knew the significance of the familiar forest to the 3 factions. Here, it was even possible to form contracts with dragons. That was why people from the 3 factions often came here, full of hope, to search for familiars. Although most returned empty-handed, it wasn't as if no one had ever succeeded. This made the familiar forest increasingly important in their eyes. But the problem was that none of the 3 factions wanted to let the others monopolize this place. Now, Levi was asking her to burn it all down. I know what you're worried about. Levi didn't wait for her to finish asking, cutting her off directly. However, previously I only had a 70% chance of keeping you safe. Now, it's 100%. Do it, trust me. After Tiamat became his subordinate, Levi's attitude had softened quite a bit. To him, subordinates were like half family. Sakura's collar was clutched in Levi's left hand, and Ingvild's collar was lifted by his right. Without another word, he jumped onto Tiamat's back. At that moment, Tiamat spread her wings, holding that breath of dragon fire in her mouth, and with a fierce kick against the ground, she shot up into the clouds in the blink of an eye. Immediately after, she aimed her head toward the area below, which was completely obscured by clouds and where the ground couldn't even be seen, and unleashed a torrent of dragon fire. A torrent of energy, interwoven with black and red, tore through the sky, blasting a massive hole in the middle of the clouds. The wind howled at high altitude. But the moment Tiamat's dragon breath landed in the familiar forest, a massive roar completely drowned out the sound of the wind. Flames erupted from the forest, shooting up before Tiamat's eyes in the blink of an eye. Billowing flames and black smoke shot straight into the sky, forming a massive mushroom cloud. A terrifying shockwave exploded in midair. The trees and mountains in the distance that hadn't been touched by the flames were leveled in unison by the spreading shockwave. This was the power of a casual strike from Tiamat. She had already stepped half a foot into the heavenly dragon sequence, and her strength was on par with Graphia. If beings of their level were to truly fight, destroying a country or sinking a continent wouldn't be difficult at all. This level of power was the peak that the interior of a planet could withstand. In his previous life, while watching the original work, Levi had seen Seraphal casually destroy an island with a playful strike, and he had also seen her easily freeze an entire country over something trivial. Back then, he had vaguely guessed as much. After truly transmigrating, he felt this point even more deeply. Battles between ultimate-class devils could alter mountains and rivers. If the range of destruction weren't suppressed by barriers, destroying a city would be a trivial matter. Not to mention those at the level of Tiamat, Seraphal, and Graphia. That was why he felt everyone in the transcendent sequence was a monster. Like Godia, who could smash through the Earth's crust and destroy a planet with a light wheel. Like Tiamat, who could consume all life on a planet with the sea of life in a short amount of time. Destroying a planet was probably just the lowest tier capability at this level. Standing on the devastated ground, Levi's mind was fixated on those monster-level entities. Whether it was gods, beast emperors, that divine beast suspected to be the sun, or that bodhisattva with the eerie aura, these guys all stood at the pinnacle of a certain realm. Some had even surpassed that level, just one step away from existences like the dragon gods, yet they still couldn't quite reach it. Guys of that level couldn't even be described as terrifying anymore. The only ones truly standing at the very top were the dragon gods. Such existences had activity ranges that could no longer be contained by a single planet, a single universe, or a single parallel spacetime. They were monsters drifting outside the world, not belonging to this realm at all. Thinking of this, Levi looked down at his own palm. His mind recalled the time he activated his Sin Devil trigger. At that time, he was completely out of control, having no consciousness, let alone any memory of it. So he had no idea what that form felt like, or what it was like to hold that power in his hands. Levi clenched his fist. Looking at the place before him that he had destroyed, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Sooner or later, he would definitely be able to fully master the Sin Devil trigger. When that time came, he would go to see even more distant worlds. To witness those guys in the X-world who were even fiercer than the dragon gods. But before that, he had to become stronger, much stronger. While Levi was pondering, Sakura beside him had already raised her hand, aiming at the ground, and remotely activated the magic circles that had been set up in the familiar forest in advance. Those magic circles instantly opened a large number of gates leading to the imaginary space. The familiars, who were being engulfed by the flames, hurriedly shielded their clansmen and scrambled desperately into the gates. Tiamat hadn't really used much effort, she was just going through the motions, and she didn't intend to wipe them all out. The flames slowly died out, and the once lush familiar forest had turned into a scorched wasteland. But on this ruin, there were still some familiars left that hadn't been easily burned to death by the high temperatures. Levi turned to look at Ingvild and nodded at her. Ingvild understood, jumped down from Tiamat's back, closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and a melodious singing voice drifted out. Her magic power spread with her singing, outlining spells in the air. The bodies of those injured familiars began to slowly recover. Tiamat frowned as she watched. She couldn't understand what Levi was thinking at all. It was clearly he who wanted to destroy the familiar forest, yet now he was letting Ingvild save the surviving familiars. Save. Wait. Tiamat suddenly realized. Levi hadn't let Sakura release the familiars that had previously escaped into the imaginary space. And those familiars who had survived the natural disaster were looking at Ingvild with gratitude. Tiamat seemed to understand something. Before contacting Searsex, Levi patted Tiamat on the shoulder. Go to the imaginary space and watch over that group of familiars, don't let them run around. If they accidentally find the entrance to the imaginary number world, although they don't have the ability to destroy or open it, it would be troublesome if they wandered in by mistake. Ever since he found out that Tim was imprisoned in the imaginary number world, Levi had more plans for this group of familiars. Hearing this, the expression on Tiamat's face clearly read, just as expected. Levi didn't take it to heart at all. It was like that anyway. There were strong familiars, and there were useless ones. Signing contracts one by one, how long would that take? Familiars are the kind of things that should be piled up in droves. As for now, Levi looked around at the scorched earth, raised his hand, and used a communication spell to contact Searsex. Searsex, the familiar forest is gone. Searsex was smiling as he answered the communication, and he was quite happy to see it was Levi. He raised his hand to signal his good friend Ajuka to wait a moment, then connected the spell. He had no secrets from Ajuka, and the same went for matters concerning Levi. Then, Searsex, the familiar forest is gone. One sentence from Levi instantly froze the smile on Searsex's face. The expression of Ajuka, who was beside him, also darkened on the spot. Neither of them thought Levi was joking. Searsex had a good relationship with Levi, and he believed that after their interactions over this period, he understood Levi to some extent. That guy is someone who doesn't like to smile and is extremely serious about doing things. Although Ajuka hadn't met Levi, with Searsex's guarantee, coupled with the solid things Levi had done, he also felt that Levi was one of the very few devils who were wholeheartedly devoted to the development of the underworld. So after hearing Levi's words, his first thought wasn't to suspect Levi, his mind was entirely focused on, who exactly did this. Immediately after. Searsex, have Levi evacuate first. No, I will go pick him up personally. This information is too critical, but since he dug up this kind of information, he is very likely to be targeted for assassination by the mastermind behind the scenes. Tell him to be careful. Searsex nodded immediately after hearing Ajuka's words. But before he could say anything, Levi, hearing Ajuka's voice on the other end, added another sentence. Is that Lord Ajuka Beelzebub? Since you are also there, let me apologize to you first. This guy should be your blood relative, this Diodora. I'm sorry, I've already killed him. Upon hearing this, Searsex's gaze immediately fell upon Ajuka. He understood what kind of person Levi was and subconsciously intended to start helping to explain. But Ajuka raised his hand to stop Searsex and spoke himself. Diodora. I vaguely recall there being such a guy. I don't quite remember who exactly it is. If someone else had killed him, I would have asked a few more questions. But since it was your hand that did it, he must have had a reason to die. Ajuka was expressionless, but the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Levi, well killed. Levi heard Ajuka reply to him like that on the other end. For a moment, he was completely stunned. This unconditional trust from Ajuka made Levi feel a bit uneasy. He had been close to Searsex before, and to be blunt, he truly considered Searsex a friend. As for the reformist faction and those other Satan-class devils, he hadn't taken them to heart at all. In the end, it was mutual utilization. Running on both sides, taking benefits from both ends. blowing wind about Rizvam to the reformist faction, while leaking the bottom line of the reformist faction to Rizvam. 2 jobs, 2 paychecks, 2 sets of resources. What was the problem with that? Working 2 jobs, why shouldn't one receive double the wages? But right now, with Ajuka being so sincere, Levi felt a bit guilty instead. Alright, I'll scam this side a little less in the future. Calculating this in his heart, he wasn't idle with his mouth, continuing along with what Ajuka had said. He had originally intended to dump all the blame on Tiamat. But if he did that, his chance of keeping her safe would only be 70%, the remaining 30% would be to learn from Rizvam and directly betray the underworld. Let him abandon his own subordinate. Dream on. But it just so happened that the idiot Diodora came to provide a godlike assistant even threw in a big gift. Now, the certainty was pulled up to a full 100%. This matter was my own decision, sorry. But if I had to do it again, I would still slaughter him. The only thing I feel I did wrong was being slow. If I had been faster, perhaps the familiar forest wouldn't have been destroyed. Searsex and Ajuka looked at each other. Both of their expressions were not very good. Of course, not because of Levi. It was because of Diodora, and even more so because of the current reformist faction devils. These guys were becoming more and more like the nobles of the old Satan faction. This pot of blame, even Ajuka's family would have to shoulder half of it. Only Grimoire was still a bit better. After all, our family has few members and no branch families, so they didn't do things too excessively, which could barely be considered restrained. It's fine, Levi, this isn't your fault. I'll come pick you up, it's probably not safe on your end. Ajuka was still worried about Levi's safety. Levi replied directly, no need. The battle on my end has already ended. But you two really do need to come over. You probably won't be able to imagine how badly this place has been destroyed just by me telling you. Hearing Levi say this, Searsex and Ajuka's hearts sank even further, but they still nodded. The familiar forest was too important. If the angels or fallen angels discovered something because the devils hadn't cleaned up their mess properly, it would most likely become the fuse for another 3-way war. Ajuka immediately began constructing a magic formula, and Searsex also gave an affirmative reply. The scene at the familiar forest was too tragic to look at. When Searsex and Ajuka arrived, only one word remained in their minds: devastated. At first, when Levi said the forest was gone, they had only imagined a pitch-black forest of dead trees. Later, when Levi said the destruction was worse than imagined, they thought it would at most turn into a pile of ruins. But seeing it with their own eyes, they realized how naive they had been. The entire ground has been burned to charcoal. The remaining familiars are all low-class ones that aren't afraid of high temperatures, and their numbers are barely even 1% of what they used to be. As Ajuka said this, his brow furrowed tightly. Searsex sighed beside him. At this moment, Levi walked over with Graphia, whom he had just called over. There's no need to worry about the familiars. When the forest caught fire, I had one of my servants act. That fellow's magic attribute is void, and they transferred over 90% of the familiars in the forest into the imaginary space to save them. Searsex's eyes lit up. Thanks to you. Sure enough, Levi was someone who could always surprise people. Hearing that most of the familiars were still alive, Ajuka finally let out a sigh of relief and turned to look at Levi. This is our first time meeting, right? Just like how you call Searsex, you can just call me Ajuka. By the way, what exactly happened here? Now that both Transcendants had arrived, Levi's safety was completely guaranteed, so Ajuka turned his focus to the matter at hand. Searsex also looked over. Levi let out a long sigh. To be honest, if someone were to tell me what happened here right now, I definitely wouldn't believe it. Even the most ridiculous story couldn't invent a guy like this. After speaking, he glanced at Graphia. Under the gaze of Searsex and Ajuka, Graphia raised her hand and unfolded a blue magic circle. Rather than me just explaining, it's better if you see for yourselves. Ajuka's gaze fell upon the magic circle. Magic to observe the past. Graphia, impressive. I didn't expect you to have completed even this. He had also researched this magic before, mainly to gather intelligence and clarify certain matters. When Ajuka was researching this magic, he had always been stuck at a bottleneck. Because half of the relevant data was in the underworld, while the other half originally belonged to God and remained in heaven. Therefore, he had been unable to make a breakthrough for a long time. But Graphia was different. The magic formula data from heaven happened to be recorded in the Key of Solomon. Levi had handed all of those contents directly to her. When she first received these things, Graphia could hardly believe her eyes. But now, she was completely used to it. It's nothing major. Graphia made a casual polite remark, and the magic formula in her hand gradually took shape. Scenes of the past gradually emerged. Levi had long known what they would see next. On the contrary, Graphia did not have a very clear understanding of what had happened before. She also watched along with Sirzex and Ajuka. What appeared on the screen was Diodora standing in front of Levi and Tiamat. That face of his looked as if he was second only to God. Especially when he spoke words of disrespect toward Levi, Graphia's expression instantly turned icy cold. If she had been present at the time, how could she have let such trash dirty Lord Levi's hands? Sirzex and Ajuka's disgust toward that group of reformist faction devils grew even stronger. But facing Graphia at this moment, they could only put on forced smiles. Up to this point, everything seemed fairly normal. But what happened next was completely incomprehensible to Sirzex and Ajuka. That fellow Diodora actually wanted to make Tiamat his familiar. Immediately after, Tiamat roared in anger, and Diodora pulled out a snake to defend himself. The projection cut off there. Ajuka sighed. The magic formula to observe the past is still too fragile. Once a Satan class gets serious, even if it is activated here, it will be interfered with and self-destruct. After lamenting, Ajuka turned his gaze back to Levi. Just like I said earlier, well killed. How could I, Ajuka, have such a foolish relative? Hearing this, Sirzex's expression became very subtle. He finally understood what Levi meant just now. Honestly. If they hadn't played the projection and just listened to Levi's verbal description, he would have believed Levi's words. After all, the trust was there. But he would definitely have doubted in his heart, could there really be such a brainless fellow? Now he believed it. There really was. And unfortunately, that thing was a devil. Levi looked at Sirzex and Ajuka's reactions, then glanced at Graphia. Noticing that her expression also turned odd for a brief moment, he shook his head and continued to explain what happened next. Levi spread his hands and continued, as for what happened after that, you guys know Tiamat. She is a dragon king after all. No matter how good her temper is, she wouldn't be able to suppress her anger after hearing those words. But as you saw earlier, Diodora pulled out a black snake in front of the roaring Tiamat. He revealed the snake he had stripped from Diodora. Sirzex and Ajuka looked over, their faces expressionless. They knew in their hearts that this thing was definitely not simple, but they felt that no matter how ridiculous it was, it couldn't compare to the foolishness Diodora had just displayed. And then, Levi threw out a statement that made them cry out in surprise. Diodora used that black snake, and his strength instantly soared to the Satan class. What? Are you kidding me? Satans, dragon kings, seraphs, and fallen angel cadres were already the ceiling-level existences of this world. Anything higher was basically an exception class, which was not something one could easily encounter. Yet Diodora, that trash who was at the absolute bottom even among the ultimate class devils, managed to step into the Satan class with this thing. Doesn't this mean that this thing's boost to strength is even more exaggerated than a Longinus's balance breaker? If it were just that, it would be fine, but the key issue was that they had absolutely no idea about its background. It wasn't personal ability, nor was it a sacred gear, it just appeared out of nowhere. What if this thing could be mass-produced? What on earth is this? Ajuka asked. Levi shook his head and handed the magic sphere sealing the snake to Searsex. I don't know either, which is why I wanted to let you know so you can investigate it. No matter what it is, some devils have already obtained it, yet you have no news of it at all. This is not a good thing for the underworld. It will cause trouble. Hearing him say this, Ajuka nodded. Even though I've lamented this before, I must say it again. Really, thank you for doing all this for the underworld. Hearing this, Levi grinned. Don't say that. Aren't I also a part of the underworld? Since I have the ability to do this, then with great power comes great responsibility. Hearing this, Searsex and Ajuka showed gratified expressions on their faces. They had absolutely no idea that the entire incident had been orchestrated by Levi from start to finish. Once the snake was handed over to Ajuka, Levi gradually filled in the rest of the story. Later, Tiamat was completely infuriated by Diodora, and the two of them started fighting. The commotion was too big, and I was afraid things would get even more out of hand, so I had to step in as a mediator. At first, I really didn't want to make a move directly. But that fellow Diodora said some things that I couldn't ignore. He seemed to think that as long as I saw the existence of that black snake, I had to die. He also said that the familiar master was killed by him because of this. Levi paused. After hearing all this, I knew I couldn't let him leave. But he was a Satan class after all, so capturing him alive was unrealistic. I could only use this method to keep the black snake. Speaking of the familiar master, after Levi's clairvoyance upgraded, he had unexpectedly obtained a certain level of past vision ability. Later, when he went to find the familiar master and found him missing, he casually investigated it. With this investigation, even he hadn't expected to unearth such an important clue. Hearing the news of the familiar master's death, the disgust on Searsex and Ajuka's faces deepened even further. However, they also understood that facing a Satan-class opponent, it was impossible for Levi to capture him alive. Moreover, there was also a rampaging Tiamat causing trouble on the side at that time. It was only reasonable. It was completely understandable. Diodora is dead, and the black snake remains in my hands. The familiar forest was burned completely clean by a breath of dragon fire from the enraged Tiamat. I had my servant save those familiars, and then I personally beat Tiamat to the ground. Levi felt that he could now explain what needed to be explained. He looked at Searsex and Ajuka in front of him and said in a calm tone, "Now, Tiamat is already my servant. So, about the familiar forest, I am very sorry. Those familiars are still alive. As for the reconstruction of the forest, since it was a mistake made by my servant, I will use the power of the Lucifer clan to restore the familiar forest to its original state." This was what Levi actually wanted to say. When it came to familiars, he didn't plan on only letting Sakura control a few. If he was going to play, he would play big. Sakura could keep the beast herds in the imaginary space. When their numbers ran low, she could return to replenish them. In that case, the familiar forest was the most suitable place. But the original familiar forest didn't belong to him, so it wasn't that free if he wanted to replenish familiars at will. But now it was different. The forest was burned, and he would rebuild it. In that case, who the rebuilt familiar forest would belong to would be hard to say. If someone else had suggested this, Searsex and Ajuka would definitely have thought in that direction. But Levi's impression score in their hearts was too high. Instead, these words made them feel that Levi was a fellow who was willing to shoulder responsibility for his servants and was extremely good to his family. Especially Searsex, who came from the house Grimoire and had always regarded his servants as family. Looking at Levi now, his favorability rose by another large margin. Ajuka and Searsex were old friends. Simply put, the way of thinking of these two was about the same. So Levi doing this now actually made them feel he was too soft-hearted, and they didn't think at all about Levi wanting to turn the familiar forest into a private arsenal. However, compared to that, Searsex and Ajuka were more concerned about something else. Levi, did you turn Tiamat into your servant? Sears's tone was full of surprise when he said this. Because Levi's strength. Wait, Levi, are you already a high-class devil? Back when Levi wiped out the Nabirius clan, Sears and Ajuka had already realized this kid was no weakling. But at that time, his level was at most below a middle-class devil. Now, upon closer observation, they realized that Levi seemed to be far more formidable than they had imagined. Hearing this, Levi didn't hide anything. He smiled and entered his devil trigger form directly, releasing that Satan-class power. Sorry. I was living with Rizvam before. Even if I had the strength, I felt it was better to keep it hidden until I was sure I could take him out. But there's no need to hide it from you too. Sears Ajuka, I'm probably even stronger than you think. Sears and Ajuka both laughed after hearing this. They completely understood why Levi had been hiding his strength. If Levi had been as flashy as Valley back then, it wouldn't have just been Valley Lucifer who had to run away. Levi might have ended up on the run too. In fact, they both felt that Levi was far smarter than Valley in this regard. So they didn't dwell on it, merely marveling at Levi's truly astonishing talent. However, they were both exceptionally gifted individuals themselves. While they were somewhat interested in Levi's devil trigger, they didn't press for his secrets. After all, they knew better themselves. Sears had his power of destruction. Ajuka had his own trump cards. There was no need to ask about such things. Geniuses, after all, had their own ways, and it was nothing strange. As for the familiar forest, you know what you're doing regarding your servant. With Graphia by your side, we don't need to nag you about that. As for the familiar forest, Sears paused there, and Ajuka took over. You don't need to worry about the reconstruction, leave it to me. As for the funding, Sears and I will figure out a way to get it from elsewhere. Since Tiamat has become your servant, the familiar forest will be under your jurisdiction from now on, which saves us some trouble. As Ajuka finished speaking, Levi paused, frowning. But what about the angels and the fallen angels? Sears and Ajuka exchanged a glance and laughed. You don't need to worry about that, leave it to us. You've done so much for the underworld, it's time we shared some of the burden for you. Check-in target. Ajuka completed. Check-in reward. Holy Sword Mastery. Holy Sword Mastery can ignore restrictions and wield any holy sword. Ophis felt like something was wrong. She was 1.65 meters tall, wearing a black dress, and walked barefoot out of a spatial rift. At this point, she hadn't yet encountered the Dragon Eater, nor did she look like the little girl she would become in the future. In front of her was the scorched earth of the familiar forest. But her confusion had nothing to do with this forest. In fact, Ophis didn't even know this had originally been a forest. Even if she had known, she wouldn't have cared. What really concerned her was something else. The snake's position, it's wrong. She stared expressionlessly at the scorched earth, her eyes full of confusion. In the beginning, she had used the snake to track that guy's location, right here. But by the time she tore through space to get here, the snake's signal had first been blocked, and then it had completely lost contact. Ophis found it baffling. After a while, the snake appeared again. This time, she rushed over immediately, only to find that the snake seemed to be avoiding her, heading straight into the underworld. This left Ophis puzzled. And, should she chase it into the underworld, or stay here and keep looking? Ophis tilted her head, stunned in place. Her gaze inadvertently swept across the distance, and she noticed a figure. Short black hair, a dark blue hooded coat. A young man stood on slightly higher ground, directing the mixed group of familiars and devils, apparently rebuilding the forest. Through the snake's memories, Ophis remembered this devil. The name seemed to be Levi. The snake told her that this person could help her defeat Great Red. However, he doesn't look like it. Levi's meager strength was nothing in Ophis's eyes. That level of power couldn't help her at all. But the third dragon god who appeared at that time might be useful. And was Levi, in fact, that dragon god? Thinking of this, Ophis stuck out the tip of her tongue and lightly licked her lips. If I taste his magic, won't I know? Searsex and Ajuka had already returned to the underworld. With the familiar forest destroyed like this, although the two Satans said, since it was first discovered by devils, it's not a big deal, they had run off faster than anyone, clearly rushing back to deal with the angels and fallen angels. Oh, right. They might also have to deal with those reformist faction devils. Levi looked at the familiars and devils who had already started rebuilding the forest, then recalled Searsex and Ajuka's hurried departure, and couldn't help but sigh. The job of a Satan, it's truly a dog's work. Graphia, standing behind him, spoke up. Lord Levi, you seem to have a strong opinion about the reformist faction devils. Not really. Levi shook his head, not turning around to look at her, and answered casually. Strictly speaking, I don't like most devils. In front of Searsex and Ajuka, Levi could still put on a smile. But in front of Graphia, he couldn't be bothered to act. His face instantly lost its smile, becoming terrifyingly cold instead. Standing there, he exuded a chilling low pressure. Most devils have absolutely no self-awareness. They are clearly weaklings, yet they rely on being protected by the strong and bark louder than anyone. Don't devils always claim to be a race where power is supreme? If that were truly the case, this situation shouldn't exist. Those guys from the old Satan faction are typical weaklings. This group of people in the reformist faction is also heading in that direction. So, Graphia, I probably hate most of the devils in the underworld, but compared to the civil war before, the current situation is indeed much better. The situation before dragged on for so many years, there was no energy to change it. Now that the reformist faction has beaten the old Satan faction down, although those disgusting types are still around, as long as the new generation of devils replaces them over a few generations, the situation should slowly improve. Graphia responded softly. She didn't say anything more. But she thought to herself. Graphia sighed softly. But if you were willing to lead the underworld, after a few generations of development, it would surely become more and more prosperous. But she knew Levi's personality. This lord was simply not the type of devil who could sit obediently behind a desk. He had absolutely no interest in the position of Satan from the very beginning. Alright, Graphia, let's put these matters aside. Levi was just about to say something to lighten the mood, but halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt someone grab his collar. His observation hockey could predict the trajectory of the future to some extent. His intuition had always been sharp. But this time, he hadn't sensed anything. It was as if the other party's presence, the moment he realized it, was already right in front of him, grabbing his clothes. Lord Levi. Graphia raised her hand, ready to act. Levi caught a glimpse of the person grabbing his collar, his pupils shrinking sharply. She was half a head shorter than Levi, her whole body almost leaning against him. Don't attack. Levi immediately stopped Graphia. Because he saw the check-in task on that person. Check-in task. Help Ophis defeat Great Red. Seeing this task, the person's identity was very clear. Don't be nervous, Graphia, and don't worry about me. If she really wanted to kill us, we would already be dead. Because, this person is the strongest in this world, the infinite dragon god, Ophis. Ophis's thoughts were very simple. Earlier, her snake had swallowed a bit of magic power and determined that the owner of that magic was the newly born dragon god. Moreover, before the snake's perception was blocked, she had seen Levi through the snake. So when she saw Levi, she only wanted to taste a bit of his magic power to confirm if he was the person she was looking for. But after she had Levi in her grasp, she was actually a bit troubled. She had never done this kind of thing before. So, where should she take a bite? She blinked, locking eyes with Levi. After a long while, Graphia finally recovered from her shock, and just as Levi was about to open his mouth to ask what was going on, Ophis suddenly spoke. Lower your head a little. Huh. Levi didn't understand what she wanted to do, and subconsciously lowered his head. Ophis raised her arms, wrapped them around his neck, pulled his head down, and stood on her tiptoes. The moment their lips touched, Levi's eyes widened. All the dialogues he had simulated in his mind countless times were wiped clean at this moment. For a few seconds, he even forgot how to think. Ophis had initiated the contact, and she was the one who pulled away first. All that was left was a lingering, indescribable fragrance around the tip of Levi's nose, and he couldn't tell if he felt disappointed or empty inside. Ophis licked her lips. It really is you. When she said this, her eyes were fixed straight on Levi. Immediately after, she tightened her grip on Levi's hands slightly. Levi had originally thought she would say something else, but Ophis just remained silent. She waited for a long time, and when Levi didn't respond, she tilted her head, her face still wearing that expressionless look, as if expressing a question mark. No. What exactly do you mean by, it really is you? Levi had no choice but to ask himself. The third dragon god, capable of defeating Great Red, and taking back the power of silence. After Ophis finished speaking, she continued to look at Levi expressionlessly. Help me. Her words were truly hard to understand. At the very least, Levi was certain that Graphia definitely didn't understand what Ophis was talking about right now. But Levi, having read the original work, roughly had an idea. To put it simply, Ophis's goal was to defeat Great Red and return to that eternal silence outside the world. But she had been driven out by Great Red using some method she didn't know, and feeling she couldn't win, she thought of finding a helper to go back together. So, to speculate simply, I think I understand what you mean, but my power is very different from what you imagine. I can't fully control the thing yet, and even if I were willing to help you, I can't fulfill your wish right now. Hearing Levi say this, Ophis blinked. She could understand what Levi meant. But that power he couldn't fully control, Ophis didn't quite understand what exactly Levi was referring to. However, she had tasted a bit of Levi's magic power before, and at that time, she had detected something unusual in the process of his magic power recovery. Was this what Levi was talking about? Ophis was a bit confused, so she asked directly. Are you saying that you haven't fused with the magic source? Ophis was puzzled, but Levi was even more confused than her. This time, he had absolutely no idea what Ophis was talking about. Ophis could see that too. She intended to tell Levi in the simplest way possible. Then, lower your head. Again. Levi hesitated for a few seconds, but in the end, he lowered his head. Everything that followed was a repeat of what had just happened. Ophis wrapped her arms around Levi's neck and stood on her tiptoes. However, this time, Levi felt something. Ophis is quite soft. PFF'd. It's that Ophis smells quite good. That's not right either. It was his magic power, a portion of it had been drained away by Ophis. As soon as the magic power inside Levi was drained, the channel to the source opened up again, helping him recover energy. During this process, he vaguely sensed that Ophis's will was guiding his consciousness, following that interface of magic recovery, passing all the way through, to the other side of the source. He had thought about going over there to take a look before. After all, he had never been able to figure out whether his magic power counted as infinite in the true sense. But no matter how he tried before, he couldn't do it. Today, under Ophis's guidance, he had actually made it over. And then he saw it. The root of all magic. The source of life. The beginning of everything. The end of everything. That origin that constantly flowed outward with everything. He had seen the root. Immediately after, Ophis's will seemed to insist on guiding the root, forcing it into his body through the interface connected to him. The particulate energy scattered from the root poured into Levi's body along the channel. His body instantly felt like it had been thrown into a furnace, its temperature soaring crazily. In that instant, he felt it. Power without end. Magic power without an upper limit. Everything was boundless. With just a single thought from him, anything could be crushed directly. But this feeling only lasted for a split second. Ophis realized that Levi's body couldn't withstand so much energy at all, so she immediately and actively severed the connection. Levi slowly returned to normal. His consciousness cleared up again, and then he noticed, in just those few seconds of time, he had gone from just stepping into the high-class devil level to rushing all the way to the critical point between a high-class devil and the highest-level devils. Now he finally understood what Ophis meant. He also understood what she had said just now. Ophis must have discovered that when he recovered magic power, the other side of the source was helping him refill it. She felt that Levi's state was a bit like hers, but also not quite the same. Because she didn't need to go through any intermediary, what was empty in her body would be refilled directly, or rather, it wouldn't be consumed at all. Therefore, in her view, as long as Levi removed this middle step and fused with the root directly, he could be like her, becoming infinite in the true sense. She thought this was what Levi meant. But Levi was not Ophis. In the future, he might find a way to do it, but right now, it was impossible. However, Ophis seemed unable to understand this. To her, this kind of thing was as natural as eating and drinking. So she turned her head again and looked at Levi. Lower your head. The look in her eyes was clear, she intended to do it again. Levi recalled that feeling of being about to burst from just a moment ago. Although he could tell from Ophis immediately stopping that she definitely wouldn't let anything happen to him, that sensation was truly unpleasant. So this time, he didn't listen to Ophis and cleared his throat first. Let's put this aside for now. Why don't we talk about how to deal with Great Red instead? Ophis's face still had no expression, and her speech had no inflection. But the speed of her reply still revealed a bit of eagerness. It was obvious. She liked to hear that. Levi stared at Ophis opposite him and slowly opened his mouth. As for dealing with Great Red, even if you didn't come to us, it's something we would have to do sooner or later. I can see some fragments of the future. Because of what I've seen, I will seek out the strong in this world, those who can be considered combat power, in the future. You and Great Red are no exception. Hearing Levi say this, Ophis nodded. As long as you can help me get back the silence, I will agree to any condition you set. This was her attitude. The same went for the Chaos Brigade. They wanted power, so Ophis gave them the snakes, giving them what they wanted. As for Levi, if he wanted her to do something, as long as he was willing to act, Ophis would also provide compensation. Compared to the Chaos Brigade, Ophis trusted Levi more. Not to mention that the aura of the third dragon god she felt earlier couldn't be fake. Levi also harbored the seeds of infinity within him. He had the potential to achieve infinity. The possibility of dealing with Great Red was also much greater than with the Chaos Brigade. Hearing her say this, the scene of Ophis helping him experience the power of infinity flashed through Levi's mind. However, that thought lasted only a moment, and he quickly adjusted himself. If I help you take back the silence, and the condition is that you cannot go back, will you agree to that too? Ophis blinked. Except for that, I will agree to anything. Seeing her childish appearance, Levi smiled. Behind him, Graphia had been shocked from just now until now. So this is what the infinite dragon god looks like. She now not only didn't find Ophis scary, but on the contrary, thought she was kind of cute. Placing this thought alongside her knowledge of the infinite dragon god's power, Graphia couldn't calm her heart down. The destruction of the familiar forest couldn't be kept secret. Among the heaven, fallen angels, and devils, if any one of the three sides had the intention, no matter how the familiar forest was destroyed, it could directly become the fuse for a great war. But the fallen angels' governor Azazel was already fed up with war. He hated fighting even more than Michael and Sirzex. He would never initiate trouble, even if it killed him. The same went for Michael. After God died, angels could no longer increase their numbers, so he had no enthusiasm for war to begin with. As for the devils, it goes without saying, the reformist faction had taken power, And after Sirzek's and Ajuka became Maos, they all started talking about peace and living their lives. To put it simply, none of the three sides wanted to start a war now. This was the fundamental reason why Sirzeks and Ajuka had agreed to Levi in the familiar forest earlier. Because they knew that the other two sides didn't want to fight either, which was why they dared to nod so readily. Regarding the destruction of the familiar forest, they also proactively contacted Michael and Azazel. The familiar forest is gone. As soon as Michael and Azazel heard this news, they were quite shocked. But after Sirzeks explained the ins and outs of the matter, they didn't pay as much attention to it. Anyway, if the familiar forest was destroyed, then it was destroyed. It could be rebuilt, and the familiars inside were all still there, so there was no major problem. In comparison, Michael and Azazel were actually more interested in other things. For example, Levi. Azazel had known about Levi for a long time. He hadn't even dared to tell Sirzeks until now that Valley was on his side, basically existing like his adopted son. So Azazel had always been quite curious about this older brother of Valley. And Michael's point of focus was more direct. Levi Lucifer has taken Tiamat as a subordinate. Michael was surprised by this. Sirzeks didn't beat around the bush and gave him the answer directly. Levi, on his end, didn't seem to have any hesitation. I wouldn't propose such an unscrupulous condition. He looked at Ophis, his tone unhurried. But since you sought me out, it means you already have an idea about the power I released earlier. If I can master that power, helping you take out Great Red wouldn't be a problem. Come to think of it, this is something I was going to do anyway, so on this point, we can even count as helping each other. But apart from this, when that time comes, even if Great Red is gone, that so-called silence of yours probably won't be able to stay silent. Levi stared at Ophis, completely unconcerned by the increasingly rapid breathing of Graphia beside him, and smiled as he said the second half of the sentence. That place is destined to become a battlefield, it won't be long. I am cultivating him as the next Mal Lucifer. Bringing you here today, apart from the familiar forest matter, there are some other things I want to deal with all at once while I am still in power. Michael and Azazel understood in their hearts that this was the main event, and both their expressions turned serious. Sirzeks took a deep breath and laid his cards on the table. You two should prepare for a while as well. I'll say it straight, I don't want to see war again. On this point, I guess you two think the same. But right now, you have quite a few troubles on your side too. It's the same on my side. The reformist faction has just found its footing, and there's a pile of headaches. Then let's set a time. After we've all cleaned up our own messes, let's hold a three-way talk together. Actually, Sirzeks had been unable to make up his mind before. If the new generation of devils wasn't up to par, signing a peace treaty in their generation might not be a good thing for the devils. After all, devils are a warlike race, sometimes war is actually a necessity. But after he saw a new generation like Levi with his own eyes, he got over that hurdle in his heart. At that time, our three races will sign a permanent peace treaty, completely putting an end to the war between the three races. The silence will disappear. Ophis heard this and blinked. She didn't quite understand Levi's meaning. Levi nodded. Yes, if everything matches up with those fragments of the future I've seen, then the silence will very likely disappear. And if you and Great Red keep dragging it out like this, maybe other problems will pop up. Ophis didn't doubt Levi. She just frowned, a bit conflicted. But after a while, she stopped thinking about it and her gaze fell back on Levi. Even so, I still want to take back the silence first. All right then. Levi saw that everything that needed to be said had been said, and Ophis still insisted on her original idea, so he smiled and nodded. Regarding Great Red, I will help you once I have mastered my power. When that time comes, if the two of us join forces, even it will not be our match. Ophis nodded upon hearing this. Levi then took the opportunity to put forward his own request. Then, As an exchange, or rather, this isn't really a trade at all, but a reasonable matter. Just like how we will go to subjugate Great Red in the future, we can help you because this is also beneficial to us. Since as long as we become stronger and join forces to face Great Red, we can achieve all our goals, then before I have completely mastered this power, Ophis, you must protect my safety. Is that okay? To put it bluntly, this was a transaction. But after spending these days in contact with Ophis, Levi knew clearly that relying on a transaction to bind her was simply unreliable. Just like how she also had a transaction with the Chaos Brigade. But when she discovered that Levi's side was more promising and more direct, she immediately came to him. Ophis was too simple-minded. Therefore, as long as it was a decision she made herself, such as the idea of taking back the silence, no matter what others said to her, she wouldn't listen. If he purely made a deal with her, that little head of hers could turn around and make the same deal with someone else, she simply wouldn't think about the complications between factions. What Levi had to do was to lay out the pros and cons in front of her, let her see that future with her own eyes, and then let her choose for herself, joining his side as a matter of course. It was definitely not a simple transaction. Only in this way could this relationship be rooted deeper and more firmly. As soon as the words were spoken, Ophis tilted her head and pondered. She didn't think for long. Then she nodded at Levi. I should indeed protect you. She had figured it out. Levi took the opportunity to smile and extend his hand toward Ophis. All right, for the next period of time, we are partners. If there's something we can't handle, we'll think of a way together. My safety is all in your hands, Ophis. Ophis nodded in response. Okay, I understand, Levi. I really didn't expect that the infinite dragon god would just join us like this. Graphia still felt that this matter was a bit unreal. Taking advantage of the moment when Levi had Kuroka take Ophis to get familiar with the Lucifer clan castle, she directly used magic to transmit her voice to Levi, her tone filled with surprise. Graphia usually spoke very little. For her to be moved to such an exclamation showed that she was truly shocked. What's there to be surprised about? We have common interests and goals, and we haven't done anything that makes her particularly disgusted, so naturally, we can become companions. You are right to say that. Although what Levi said was perfectly reasonable, Graphia's heart was still in turmoil. After all, that was the infinite dragon god. The strongest in the world. An existence that even when God was still alive, no one dared to make a move against. A dragon god far more terrifying than those out-of-spec monsters. Since Ophis had promised to protect him, Levi knew clearly that there was basically nothing in this world that could threaten him anymore. He wasn't surprised at all by Graphia's reaction. Even he, who had read the original work and had long guessed that Ophis would eventually reach this step, was still secretly happy in his heart. But then again, Levi's gaze changed bit by bit, a cold light pressing deep within his pupils. With Ophis here now, the chances of wanting to kill Rizvam were more than just high. As long as Ophis made a move, that guy who claimed to be the strongest transcendent would also have to kneel. His sacred gear nullification was a joke to Ophis. Even if the Beast Emperor was really released later, it wouldn't be a big deal. Ophis could still handle it. Even if the Eternal War really broke out, it wouldn't matter. Come to think of it, if those monsters entrenched in the world were gone, without their oppression, he could instead let go and develop to be bigger and stronger. However, now is not the time yet. At the very least, I have to wait for this world to stabilize and for the trouble to decrease before taking action. Furthermore, Levi had inherited all the memories of the body of Levi Lucifer, and every time he thought of Rizvam, that person was like a nail stuck in his heart. And shadow that could never be pulled out. This kind of thing. This thorn of his, I'd better wait until my wings are a bit harder and pull it out with my own hands to feel satisfied. When Levi learned about the familiar forest, he was completely stunned. The reconstruction work had just begun, and Sirzex brought the good news from the angels and fallen angels to his door. Immediately after, Ajuka also carried a huge amount of resources and delivered them directly to the territory of the Lucifer clan. Levi had Graphia make a rough estimate, and found that there would be resources left over even after rebuilding the familiar forest. Ajuka also said that the rest would be considered a hard-earned fee for Levi's help in rebuilding the forest. This good thing made Levi feel a bit embarrassed. According to his original plan, he intended to pay out of his own pocket to build an arsenal, take this opportunity to get Tiamat as a retainer for free, and earn a good reputation. In his view, this was already a good deal that killed two, or even three, birds with one stone. But he never expected that Ajuka and Sirzex would actually help him expand his profits. He could even get the arsenal for free. Although Levi felt a bit embarrassed, he didn't decline in the end and accepted it politely. After the matters here were arranged, he took Ophis back to the Lucifer clan castle together. Ophis, you should live in the room downstairs from me. If something really happens, it won't be too late for you to run up. Levi stood at the door of his room, with a smile on his face, but his tone wasn't very warm. Ophis was wearing a long coat, with a black narrow-brimmed hat on her head. A pair of pointed ears poked out from her black hair, and a section was exposed under the brim of the hat, which looked quite adorable. But the problem was, it was already dark. Levi didn't intend to let anyone warm his bed. What's more, he still had things to do tonight. Why do I have to live downstairs? Ophis tilted her head and looked at him, obviously not understanding. She thought that if she really wanted to protect him, wouldn't it be more convenient to live in the same room? You might not know, but there really isn't such a rule in the silence. You don't need to sleep in the Chaos Brigade, and no one dares to get too close to you. But in the normal circumstances of this world, men and women must live separately. Men and women. Ophis blinked. If I turn into a male, would you be able to accept it? No, no, no. Levi hurriedly waved his hands, then sighed. Forget it, let me tell you straight. I have some private business later, can you give me some private space? Ophis was still frowning after listening, not quite understanding. But in the inherited memories she had carried since birth, there seemed to be something that matched the situation in front of her. So she clapped her hands with an expressionless face. Got it, you want to sleep with the female devil behind you today, right? Cough, cough, cough. A familiar cough suddenly came from the corner of the corridor. Levi knew who it was, but he felt that pretending not to hear it now was the sign of high emotional intelligence. As for Ophis, if you want to understand it that way, that's fine. Anyway, can you go back to your room now? Oh. Ophis turned and walked 2 steps, then stopped suddenly. She turned back again, still with no expression on her face. Then can I watch from the side? Absolutely not. Oh. She replied again, and only then did she walk downstairs slowly. Seeing that she had finally left, Levi breathed a sigh of relief. While pushing the door to enter the room, he deliberately raised his voice and muttered to himself. Ah, it's good that today's events weren't seen by others, otherwise I would have a headache. Sigh, I'm particularly bad at dealing with this kind of thing. And I fear trouble the most. So, when it really comes to that point, I can only deal with the people who cause me trouble. Levi dropped this sentence and dived back into the room. Tiamat then poked her head out from behind the corner of the wall and scratched her head awkwardly. Forget it, I'll just pretend I didn't hear it. Levi wasn't fooling Ophis. He really had things to do today. I don't know if it was because of Ophis's actions during their first meeting, but now that he thought about the words she said while blocking the door just now, the scene of him being guided by her to master his power appeared in his mind again. Lower your head, Levi. He sat on the chair in the room and opened the Key of Solomon. Even so, he had to exert a lot of effort to suppress that restlessness. After completely calming down, he took out that drop of Asmodeus blood from the system space. Let's try the first one. If this path works, I will have to get as much blood from the 72 Pillars families as possible next. Muttering to himself, Levi set up the technique according to the instructions on the Key of Solomon. Immediately after, he placed the Asmodeus blood in the center of the magic circle. The magic circle lit up, and that drop of blood slowly rose into the air, then suddenly stabbed into Levi's chest, piercing straight into his heart. Levi panted heavily and lay on the chair for a long while before he recovered. He felt his current state. Then, he smiled. Because, Levi raised his hands, a black magic circle lit up on his left hand, and a dark green magic circle lit up on his right hand. His original magic attribute was tracking. But now, in addition to tracking, there was one more thing. That was not a common characteristic of the Asmodeus family, but one of the possibilities that provided a greater boost to Levi, and a magic attribute that could indeed appear in the descendants of Asmodeus. Super speed. After feeling this characteristic, Levi smiled even deeper. He knew. He succeeded. The next day, Levi had just finished the experiment with the Asmodeus blood. He originally planned to deal with the arc matter first, and then run to the real world to contact Tasaka Tokiomi. After all, if he remembered correctly, Valley was about 8 years old this year. Maybe even younger. Since there was no news this year, then at the earliest next year, the 5 great families and the Grey Wizard organization in the real world would probably take action. However, this matter might also be ruined by the 4 great exorcist families and some magic societies from Type Moon. Sears X approached him first. Levi was just pondering about contacting Tasaka Tokiomi. After all, if he really wanted to intervene in the matters of the fallen angels, he had to make preparations in advance. Although it was troublesome, he couldn't just leave it alone. As a result, Sears X's call came first. And the first thing he said was, "The exchange meeting for the new generation is about to be held soon, and some engagements will be finalized at that time. Why, didn't you take a fancy to any young female devil?" Sears X said, his tone filled with laughter. "You know, for the devils of today, continuing the family line is the top priority." Upon hearing this, Levi recalled how, after Graphia came to serve as his maid, Sears X had become completely alone. He sneered. "You, an old bachelor, have the nerve to say that to me." PFF'd. On the other end of the phone, a muffled sound of a blade piercing a heart could be faintly heard. But Sears X didn't give up and continued, "Attending more events like this will benefit your reputation and give you some of the youthful energy of a young person. Hey, I am from the old Satan faction, with the surname Lucifer. You want me to go and interact with the new generation of the reformist faction? Are you sure those old geezers won't be so angry that they'll start jumping up and down in front of me?" "Absolutely not." Levi heard the certainty in Sears X's tone, and his expression slowly turned cold. "Sears X, did you do something unnecessary behind my back?" "I did do a few things, but they weren't unnecessary." Sears X was currently sitting on a desk in an office, with various reformist faction devils lying scattered on the floor around him. He casually flipped through the documents this group had secretly planned and continued the call with a smile. "If these guys aren't suppressed in time, they will sooner or later become the next batch of old Satan faction nobles. I remember you also dislike those kinds of people. Besides, you have done so much for the underworld, someone has to give you an explanation. Furthermore, some things must be nipped in the bud. I cannot let a member of the new generation like you take the blame for nothing. In this era, you no longer need to draw your sword alone in the dark. Moreover, if you can have a legitimate status within the reformist faction, you will be able to deal with Rizvam more securely." This was the reason on the surface. There was one thing Sears X hadn't said. He was grooming Levi to be the next Lucifer. Sears X was crystal clear about this in his heart. Levi had inherited the title of Lucifer, and his bloodline and power were impeccable, but his reputation was not very prominent. This gathering was the perfect opportunity to boost his reputation. Of course, Sears X also admitted that he had some selfish motives. Just a tiny bit. After all, compared to that guy Ajuka, he at least had a younger sister, didn't he? Levi didn't bother to ponder Sirzex's little hidden agendas at all. He originally really didn't want to go, but since Sirzex had put it this way, it would be a bit unappreciative to keep holding out. So he sighed. Fine, I'll go. But don't force me into a bunch of childish situations when I get there. You can rest assured about that, Tilda. Devils gathering to hold a meeting and arrange things was the most normal thing ever. Especially with this current batch of new generation devils, the youngest were only 6 or 7, and the oldest were just over 10. It hadn't been many years since the Civil War ended, so setting engagements for these little ones could be considered an important agenda. Originally, everyone should just come to such a gathering and have a good time. But unfortunately, I heard that Levi from the House of Lucifer of the old Satan faction is coming too. Isn't that right? It's that loser, right? Which family would be willing to be involved in an engagement with him? Keep your voice down. Lord Lucifer and Lord Beelzebub issued the order personally. He is considered the representative of the old Satan faction. If we lose our manners at the gathering, the old Satan faction will definitely hold it against us. The reformist faction devils, who were supposed to be chatting about engagements, were now all whispering about Levi in low voices. Observant people also noticed something. Those devils who hated the old Satan faction with a passion either had something come up at the last minute and couldn't make it today, or they were sick. Some even said they had died of illness. Because of this, everyone felt that today's gathering was not that simple. It definitely wasn't just about setting engagements. However, most devils were keeping their tails tucked, but there were a few who were secretly overjoyed. For example, the old patriarch of the Phoenix clan. His eldest son was the future heir and had long since had his marriage arranged. His second son had his own ideas and, without waiting for anyone to arrange it, found a girl he liked himself. The other party's family was not weak, and it was a suitable match, so he nodded and accepted it. He didn't come today to find a partner for his youngest daughter, who was still too young. He was here to scout for a fiancé for his third son, Riser Phoenix. He had been eyeing this for a long time. Hello, Uncle Phoenix. The old patriarch of the Phoenix clan looked down at the little girl in the puffy skirt in front of him. She was bowing properly, her movements so standard that one couldn't find any fault. The old man's face blossomed with a smile. Oh my, isn't this Rias? How long has it been since I last saw you? You've grown so tall, haha. He chatted with the little girl for a few sentences. Not long after, Rias's father, the head of the Grimoire family, also walked over. The two old guys naturally gathered together to talk. Patriarch Phoenix quietly gave a wink in the direction of his third son, Riser. That's right. The candidate for fiancé he had chosen for his son this time was not the young lady of some other family. It was the current Lucifer, Sirzex's sister, the future heir of the Grimoire family, Rias Grimoire. I'm so mad I could explode. Sirzex and Ajuka were standing together chatting when they suddenly heard a familiar female voice, full of unwilling complaints. What's wrong, Seraphal? The one fuming was none other than Leviathan, Seraphal Citri, who, like Sirzex and Ajuka, was one of the 4 great Satans. Seeing Sirzex's smiling expression, she flicked her 2 black ponytails and huffed heavily. Sirzex, how can you still smile? This time, not only is my cute Sona having to get engaged, but your sister Rias can't escape it either, right? Seraphal knew in her heart how good the relationship between Sirzex and Rias was. She also knew Rias, that girl was very headstrong. If Sirzex and the Grimoire family unilaterally set an engagement for her, the relationship between the siblings would likely go from being extremely close to a Cold War. A little sister in a Cold War with her, just thinking about it made Seraphal feel uncomfortable all over. She really couldn't understand how Sirzex could still smile. About that, Sirzex showed a helpless smile, just about to explain. The conversation was cut off directly by Ajuka. Sirzex intends to propose a rule at this gathering: everyone who wants to be his sister's fiancé must fight a match first. Only the winner will be qualified to be engaged to Rias. Huh. Seraphal blinked, suddenly realizing. So you are going to send your own people to throw the match? No. Speaking of this, the smile on Sirzex's face deepened. He scanned his surroundings and quickly found the person standing alone against the wall in the shadows of the corner. Levi. He had indeed come. So, I am serious on my end. Because I have already decided, and I have found, someone worthy of me entrusting Rias to. Hearing this, Seraphal's expression changed instantly, looking as if she were seeing Sirzex for the first time. Seraphal, why are you looking at me like that? Sirzex, you actually aren't a sister Khan. I certainly didn't mean that. Then don't talk to me. We have nothing to talk about. HMPH. She left this sentence and walked away. Sirzex and Ajuka looked at each other and could only smile bitterly, neither of them could stop her. But as soon as Seraphal turned around, the expression on her face completely changed. Since those old geezers insist on arranging some engagement for Sona, then I might as well use Sirzex's trick. Fight a match first, he can't bring himself to personally take action, and he can't bear to send his own people. But I can. Don't worry, Sona, big sister will absolutely not let you fall into anyone else's hands. She had already learned a trick from Sirzex and already had a plan in her head. The banquet. Levi stood in the shadows of the corner, watching the lively scene before him, and sighed. I didn't like these kinds of occasions in my past life. However, he wasn't just here to join the fun. Before coming, Sirzex had sought him out privately. Levi, just do whatever you want when the time comes. Do as I want. Sirzex, are you serious? I'm not someone with a good temper. Whoever provokes me, I really will take action. It doesn't matter. Sirzex had said it very decisively at the time. The reformist faction devils are becoming more and more like the old Satan faction nobles. If even they turn out like that, wouldn't all the effort we spent on reform be in vain? Therefore, it's time to deal with their affairs. Before leaving, Sirzex added another sentence. By the way, Levi, I will use my sister's engagement as a prize and hold a match. I don't want her to marry those guys. Do me a favor, participate, please. Levi nodded. He remembered that in the original work, Rias and Riser, the third of the Phoenix clan, were engaged. If there was a match, it wasn't surprising. After all, that Turkey family was famous for being unkillable. Among the new generation, there were probably very few devils who could beat that kind of thing. Let alone at this age. It was most likely arranged by the old patriarch of the Phoenix clan and Sirzex's father. Sirzex was also helpless, so he sought him out, wanting him to help block the mouths of those old geezers. Levi felt that this little favor was no problem. As soon as Levi thought of Sirzex's words earlier, he couldn't suppress the corner of his mouth. If I want to take action, I can take action, right? Perfect. Currently, he only had the blood of Asmodeus in his hands, and the remaining 71 pillars' bloodlines were nowhere to be found. If someone proactively came forward today, it would save a lot of trouble. Look at this formation, perhaps he could gather all the bloodlines he needed overnight. The more Levi thought about it, the more exciting he found it. Scanning the crowd, he quickly locked onto a few targets. Check in target, Rias Grimory, resolve her engagement problem. Check in target, Sona Citri, resolve her engagement problem. Check in target, Seraphal Citri, defeat Seraphal. Check in target, Saraord Bale, resolve his troublesome issues. Check in target, Riser Phoenix, let him know the Phoenix clan is not that invincible. Levi scanned the area and found that characters like Rias's father, just like Risei Kotamine and the others, were simply not among the check-in targets. However, excluding these, there were still 5 check-in targets he could get today. He could also get the blood of the 72 pillars while he was at it. Besides, Sirzex's words were clear, as long as he made a little commotion here in the underworld, whether it was Rizvim's group or the old Satan faction, he would be able to grasp more initiative. Previously, Levi had always been hiding and concealing himself. In the end, it was because his strength was insufficient. But since the end of the Holy Grail War, Seeing him dare to openly go to the familiar forest to set up his plans, it was clear that he had long been prepared to take action. After all, the Satan class level was enough for him to stir up quite a few things. Not to mention having Ophis as a personal bodyguard by my side. In that case, there are some secrets that really don't need to be kept hidden anymore. Levi made up his mind, stepped out from the shadows, and walked towards Saroorg Bale, who was also leaning alone in a corner. Let's get the check-in target sorted out first. As for the rest, the night is still young. Saroorg Bale hated these kinds of banquets the most. To be honest, he didn't want to show up at all. But this gathering was held in the name of the Satans, so he had to come. There was no help for it, even though he felt pathetic himself, bearing the title of the eldest son of the main Bale family, he had to come whether he liked it or not. Hey! Saroorg Bale got angry just thinking about it. That's right, for a piece of trash like me who can't even use the power of destruction, the matter of marriage contracts wouldn't even fall to me. Coming here is purely a waste of time. At this time, Saroorg Bale was not yet one of the 4 heavenly kings of the new generation of devils. Saroorg Bale had only just started training, and his physique couldn't be considered anything special yet. If it came down to fighting skills, he wasn't necessarily much worse than the younger generation. But in the eyes of other devils, he was still a loser. For him, this kind of banquet is purely a waste of time. A voice suddenly came from the side. Saroorg Bale's muscles tensed, he instinctively jumped half a step to the side, and then turned his head to look. Levi Lucifer. With just one look, Saroorg Bale recognized who this person was. Come to think of it, he himself could barely use any magic power right now, making him even more of a waste than Levi. But Levi was a direct descendant of the house of Lucifer, and his fame was much greater than his. Even someone like him who didn't like to gossip had heard of Levi's name and knew what he looked like. So it's you. Although I also think this kind of gathering is pointless, you won't gain anything by coming to talk to me. Speaking of this, Saroorg Bale didn't show a hint of inferiority. Instead, he grinned, his smile carrying a touch of arrogance. After all, I am the #1 waste of a devil, even more trash than you. That expression of yours has already betrayed your ambition. Levi shook his head. He noticed quite a few devils around them secretly glancing their way, and a smile curled on his lips. He didn't care about those gazes, but he also didn't want to drag on this boring topic with Saroorg Bale for too long. So, I'll keep it brief. Saroorg Bale, devil sleeping sickness. Devil sleep disease. If I remember correctly, that's about the name of it. At first, Saroorg Bale didn't want to say much to Levi at all. But when Levi mentioned this, his attention was immediately seized. Because, his mother was the one who had contracted this strange disease, and she was still lying there, unable to wake up. And his mother wasn't like Ingvild, who possessed immense magic power from birth. She was just a relatively weak devil. While sleeping, her magic power and life force were fading day by day. In a few more decades, she would probably die. Decades were a long time for humans, but for them, devils, decades were like a few dozen days for humans, just a very short slice of a lifetime. Saroorg Bale simply could not accept this fact. Levi saw that he was interested, so he lowered his voice and spoke unhurriedly. I have a pawn in my pieces named Ingvild Leviathan. She is a descendant of Leviathan, and her talent is very high. This person is quite famous in the underworld. But she also fell into a deep sleep for a whole 100 years because of this disease. You should know that this disease cannot improve on its own. But she has already woken up, and has become my servant. Levi stared at Saroorg Bale, and the other man's pupils constricted sharply. He didn't stay long, turned around, and walked in another direction. So, if you're interested, after the party is over, come to the house of Lucifer's residence to find me. Hello, Lord Levi Lucifer. Ah, Lord Levi, greetings. Levi walked around the banquet hall. He had originally thought about picking a few blind fools today, waiting for them to provoke him first, and then he would directly deal with them. But he never expected that the group of devils from the reformist faction would be as quiet as quail. Tisk. In the end, with no other choice, Levi could only go find Searsex. You must have done something before the party started, right? You're really something. I can tell that those people look at me with fire in their eyes, but as I walked by, absolutely no one dared to say a harsh word to me. After hearing this, Searsex smiled slowly. The words of a Satan like me still carry some weight, after all. PFF'd. Ajuka, behind him, laughed out loud. Levi looked over with a confused expression, and Ajuka didn't hide anything, directly laying it out. Before announcing the party, this guy went around to each family personally, gave them all a beating, and incidentally chopped down a few of the ones jumping around the most. If anyone still dares to bare their teeth at you at the party after that, they must be truly brainless. Ajuka. Searsex felt a bit awkward. Levi understood and scanned him up and down. So that's how it is. No wonder you told me earlier that as long as someone provokes me today, I can go ahead and take action if I want. So that's what was going on. Looking at Levi's expression, which was hard to tell if it was moved or speechless, Searsex cleared his throat. That is indeed the case. However, if we talk about the marriage contract later, this bunch of guys won't be as easy to talk to as they are now. When that time comes, if anyone can't help themselves, I'm counting on you, Levi. Levi nodded. Don't worry, leave it to me. Searsex and Ajuka didn't say anything more. They knew Levi's strength better than anyone. Even a monster of Tiamat's level could be taken as a servant. Dealing with a few of the new generation was practically like child's play. Alright, everyone knows why they came here today. Halfway through the party, Searsex stood up and spoke. Enough time has been given, and what needed to be discussed has been discussed. So I won't waste any more words. Just as some families have been particularly concerned about, I also want to hear your opinions on the matter of my sister Rias's marriage contract today. As soon as Searsex said this, those family heads who had brought their juniors along, intending to arrange a marriage with the Satan's sister, all raised their heads. Searsex noticed their reaction and continued with a smile. Among the new generation of devils, there are indeed many excellent talents. I've looked back and forth for a long time, and I haven't been able to make up my mind. He paused, deliberately leaving time for the people below to discuss. When the discussion subsided slightly, Searsex continued. So, I have finally decided to use the oldest rule of the devils, which has been preserved to this day. Just have a fight, whoever wins gets to be engaged to Rias. The old head of the Phoenix clan could hardly hide the smile on his face when he heard this. He had already talked privately with the head of the Grimoire family. Now that Searsex had proposed it himself, he not only had no objections but was actually hoping for it. After all, among the new generation, who can break the immortality of the Phoenix clan? Riser has this round in the bag. The head of the Phoenix clan became more and more pleased with himself as he thought about it. Riser was not old, and his strength was already at the high-class devil level. Even if other new generation members were older, at most they had only just touched the threshold of an ultimate class devil. Without rich combat experience or Satan class strength, it was impossible to suppress Riser's recovery ability in an instant. Combat experience. Where would the new generation get combat experience? As for Satan class, hey, he himself was still stuck at the ultimate class devil level. Where would there be so many Satan class in this world? Not to mention finding a Satan class among the new generation. Dream on. I agree. The old head of the Phoenix clan agreed immediately. Riser also stood up proudly. He was very clear about his trump card of immortality and was full of confidence. Although other families also saw this point, there were still a few who were unwilling to give up and intended to try their luck. People from other families dispersed, and Ajuka used magic to build a ring on the open ground. Everyone thought no one else would stand up. Just then, Levi walked out from the crowd, carrying Yamato. Count me in. It wouldn't make sense not to include me in such an interesting thing. Sears, can I participate? Seeing that Levi had finally shown himself, Sears nodded with a smile. Of course you can, Tilda. What a joke. Just as Sears nodded, among the family heads who had been polite to Levi just before, someone indeed jumped out. That was a man with a big beard. Levi had checked his background before. One of the 72 Pillars families, the head of the Boer clan. The head of the Luray family stopped in the middle of his sentence, his voice suddenly stuck in his throat. No, it wasn't stuck. His head had flown straight off his neck. The head spun twice in midair, still wearing an expression of shock that hadn't had time to fade, then smashed onto the ground with a bang, rolling a few times before stopping. The surroundings went completely quiet. The expressions of all the devil family heads were as if they had been slapped hard. Their pupils constricted, their lips trembled, and absolutely no one dared to make a sound. The bearded head of the Boer clan from just a moment ago, ranked 13th among the 72 Pillars of Solomon, skilled in sonic magic and telekinetic attacks, a genuine ultimate class devil. Usually, an existence of this level would be catered to and worshipped wherever they went. And yet, before he could even finish speaking, his head had moved house. How fast was it? Not a single devil present saw clearly how the blade was drawn. They only heard a crisp sound of a blade returning to its scabbard from Levi's side. Crisp, clean, without any hesitation. Just like swatting a fly. With this, the family heads who had just wanted to shout along a few words all clamped their mouths shut tight. Their teeth chattered, their cheeks were trembling, but not a single person dared to utter another word. They were not brainless people. Levi's slash didn't just cut off the head of the Boer clan head, it shattered the impression of him being a waste in their hearts. Could a waste kill an ultimate class devil with one slash? Could a waste be so fast that people couldn't even see the movement? Thinking about it now, the indifferent reactions of Sears and Ajuka earlier were clearly hinting at something. This bunch of old foxes had known long ago that Levi was not simple. They just didn't say it outright, waiting for someone to go to their death. The Boer clan head was that fool who went to his death. But clearly, devils with brains were in the majority, and there was never a shortage of those without. Levi Lucifer. A roar exploded. A burly devil walked out from the crowd, his face full of anger and righteousness. Ranked 14th among the 72 Pillars, the head of the Luray family. Skilled at inciting conflict, proficient in archery, and his magical affinity is primarily poison-based. He raised his hand to point at Levi, his voice so loud he wanted the entire banquet hall to hear. You, a remnant of the old Satan faction, dare to commit violence openly in front of the reformist faction Satans. Do you have any regard for us in the reformist faction? As he said this, he deliberately puffed out his chest, his gaze sweeping over Sears, Ajuka, and Seraphal. All three reformist faction Satans were present. He was betting on the fact that Levi wouldn't dare to strike again in front of the Satans. So what if Levi was strong? He represented the stance of the reformist faction. Even if others didn't want to help him, they couldn't just watch as he showed weakness to the reformist faction. This was an overt plot. He felt he had calculated everything perfectly. But Levi just chuckled softly. The laugh wasn't loud, yet every devil present felt a chill down their spine. Reformist faction. Old Satan faction. Levi tilted his head, his voice unhurried. As I recall, the devil civil war ended long ago. Aren't we all devils under the four great Satans now? He paused, his gaze landing on the pale face of the clan head of Larahe. What, are you planning to start another civil war? You've even divided everyone into factions, have you already drafted a list of new Satans as well? A single sentence. It completely cut off all avenues of retreat for the clan head of Larahe. His face turned deathly pale, his lips trembling, and he hurriedly tried to explain. No, that's not what I meant. I was just targeting you. Targeting me. Levi's voice suddenly rose. Do you think the surname Lucifer is beneath you, or do you think I am not qualified to stand here? I. Clang. A flash of a blade swept by. The blade of that person on the arena was so fast it was impossible to see clearly. The head of the Larahe clan was just like that, gone. The entire venue was terrifyingly quiet. Levi snuck a glance at Searsex. That guy was actually still smiling at him and even nodded. He retracted his gaze, scanned the area below the stage, confirmed that no one else was acting up, and vaulted onto the arena. If no one has any objections, let the match begin. I hate trouble, so I'll give you all a chance. Anyone who wants to fight, step up. All of you, come at me together. Those words were too arrogant. Several clan heads who still had designs on this marriage turned green with anger. But not a single one dared to speak. Just now, two slashes had cut down two ultimate class devils. If they went up, it would likely be a one-slash affair for them too. Send their own youngsters up to die at a time like this. Only someone with a sick brain would do that. The old head of the Phoenix clan, however, was in no rush to get angry. He was considered significant among the ultimate class devils, having survived the ancient war, so his judgment was naturally sharp. He could see that Levi's magical power was not weak among the younger generation, but at most, it was at the level of a high-class devil. Moreover, those two slashes earlier had basically used no magical power, purely relying on explosive force combined with just a tiny bit of magic. This fighting style was indeed frightening to other devil clans. But for his Phoenix clan, it was a different story. No matter how lightning fast a physical attack was, as long as its power only reached the level of decapitation, the Phoenix clan's immortality simply didn't care. He was quite certain of this assessment. Yet, he still didn't want to gamble with his third son's life. But he turned his head to look around. The other clan heads were all looking angry but dared not speak, and Levi was still standing on the arena so arrogantly. He suddenly felt that this might actually be an opportunity. There was risk, true. But if Riser won, not only would the marriage with Rias be secure, but Riser could also step on Levi to become famous in one battle and become a hero. The old Phoenix looked at Searsex. The other party displayed a hint of apology on his face at just the right moment. He released his hand from Riser's shoulder. Riser, who had been holding back for too long, jumped straight out of the crowd. Others might not dare, but I do. Levi, today I will let you see just how strong someone from my Phoenix clan really is. Levi looked at Riser, who had jumped onto the stage, and smiled. The system popped up a notification. Check in target Riser Phoenix, make him understand that Phoenix is not invincible. Understood. Come on up. The Cetri clan head stood in the distance, his gaze sweeping over the chaos at the edge of the arena and landing on the two figures confronting each other. Riser and Levi were standing face to face. He slowly withdrew his gaze. Seraphal, regarding Sona's marriage, even if you ruined the match I had arranged, what is meant to come will come sooner or later. The young devils of this generation no longer have the right to choose their own partners. Pure-blooded devils are becoming fewer and fewer. If marriages were truly left to the children's whims, the bloodline would be broken in the future. Therefore, intermarriage between pure bloods is, from a certain perspective, quite a sad affair. But from another perspective, this is a responsibility that this generation must bear. Father, then should I also learn from Searsex? Since you want to take away my cute Sona, at least let the strongest person come. The strongest. The Cetri clan head pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and the gaze behind the lenses flashed. Since we must choose the strongest of the younger generation, then let's pick that Levi Lucifer over there. The Cetri clan head did not oppose the engagement between his daughter and Levi Lucifer. This idea didn't just come to him, he had thought so before. Before, Levi was rumored in the underworld to be trash, but that was just a ploy by those reformist faction fanatics. From the beginning, the Cetri clan head had valued the bloodline. He had investigated Levi's background. His father was the grandson of the old Satan Lucifer, and his mother was the granddaughter of the old Satan Beelzebub. Even if Levi himself were weak, there was no fault to be found with this bloodline. Within the entire devil race, this was the most noble lineage. The probability of producing a stronger next generation was also much higher. And now, Levi had proven with his strength that this noble bloodline had indeed given him power far exceeding his peers. Looking at Levi on the stage, the Cetri clan head seemed to see the Sirzeks of the past. This son-in-law was becoming more and more pleasing to his eyes. Alas, but little Levi is currently competing for Rias's hand in marriage. If he becomes her man, that won't do. However, the Cetri clan head was not particularly skilled in combat, and he couldn't see through deeper things. But the gaze Seraphal cast toward the arena was very calm. She could see through it. Just like what the Phoenix clan head had discerned. If Levi relied only on physical strength and physical attacks, based solely on his total magical power, he would be no match for Riser. The opponent could just wear him down to death. Unfortunately, the Cetri clan head could not see through this. The old man of the Cetri clan snorted coldly, his gaze scraping across Seraphal like a knife. Regarding matters of engagement, what does it matter if one more is set? For the devils of today, the more high-quality bloodlines and the more branches, the more advantageous it is. Another high-ranking devil immediately chimed in. Too many branches are troublesome, but if it's just 2 or 3, what's the problem? The Cetri clan head's gaze landed on Seraphal, his tone becoming increasingly cold. It's you, along with Sirzeks and Ajuka, the 3 of you, with all that strength, yet you don't even leave behind any offspring. Seraphal, if Sona's engagement cannot be decided today, then you go and sign one yourself. My Cetri clan must absolutely not end with this generation of pure bloods. Seraphal rolled her eyes, then suddenly laughed out loud. That's not impossible, you know. The Cetri clan head was stunned. Seraphal rested her chin on her clasped hands, smiling as she looked at her old man. Then let's just have a match, just as I said, since you think highly of that Levi, as long as he can win, Sona's engagement is yours to decide. Devils, after all, let strength do the talking. As for that Riser, even if he wins, his strength is too weak, he is simply not qualified to take on this marriage. Seraphal said this, but in her heart, she actually felt that Riser had a better chance of winning. But to be safe. However, I don't intend to be separated from Sona. So this engagement is not just Sona's, it also represents me, Seraphal. I certainly won't agree to anyone who isn't strong enough. So after the match, I will personally test that guy. That's it. Leaving these words behind, Seraphal didn't even give her father a chance to reply, and in the blink of an eye, she vanished completely. The Cetri clan head was so angry he choked twice, unable to get a single word out. Seraphal testing him personally. Besides Sirzeks and Ajuka, who else could withstand that? Thinking of this, the Cetri clan head sighed. He couldn't control this eldest daughter, so he simply stopped trying. When his gaze fell onto the match arena, he already had an idea in mind. Let Seraphal mess around however she wants. But he had to fight for the engagement of his little daughter, who was destined to inherit the Cetri clan. Levi Lucifer, it is indeed as he said, whatever reformist faction, old Satan faction, those are all old news. Now everyone has only one identity, devil. Since that's the case, his bloodline, strength, and status, which one isn't a top-tier choice? Not bad, really not bad. As soon as Riser got on stage, flames erupted from his hands. He stared at Levi, smiling very arrogantly. Those who didn't know would think he had already won. Before Riser could finish speaking, a hole suddenly appeared in his throat. He opened his mouth, only to find he couldn't make a sound. Levi stood in place, maintaining the throwing posture. The speed at which that summoned swords flew out just now was too fast, so fast that Riser simply didn't see it clearly. However, that blood hole soon began to burn, and amidst the surging flames, the wound healed directly. Levi watched this scene, understanding it clearly. His summoned swords were sufficient for dealing with ordinary devils, but when encountering someone of the Phoenix level, it was a bit inadequate. The nature of his magical power was tracking, combined with the super speed inherited from the Asmodeus bloodline. Because these two abilities were too weak on their own, they couldn't provide a bonus to the attacks of the Yamato, but they were more than enough to enhance the summoned swords condensed from magical power. But even so, Riser was not only unafraid, but he laughed even more arrogantly. Ha ha ha, did you see clearly? Your attacks are useless against me. Now only I can hit you, you can't hurt me at all. Levi felt that this guy was even more annoying than the future Riser. That arrogant attitude of a green kid was practically written all over his face. No wonder Rias couldn't stand him from the very beginning in the original work. Swoosh! 2 more summoned swords flew over. Riser's burning hands, along with his severed arms, were burned to ash. Amidst the churning flames, new hands grew back. Levi's eyes lit up as he watched. Because, as long as he fused with the blood of Phoenix, he could also possess this kind of immortality. As for Riser, just a clown. Ha! Riser had just laughed out loud when he suddenly felt that his vision was wrong. He looked down and discovered that his feet were still standing in place. His entire body was toppling toward the arena floor. Bang! Before he could even hit the ground, Levi's foot landed on his head. He slammed that face hard against the arena surface. The next second, the high-class devil magic within Levi erupted completely. 6 pairs, 12 devil wings, unfurled suddenly. This is the symbol of noble blood. This is the mark of Lucifer. At the same time, Levi's voice was transmitted precisely into Riser's ears. Riser desperately tried to move his legs, only to find there was no reaction at all. Don't bother. Although I'm quite sorry, those legs of yours are gone forever. Levi had severed them with Yamato. Normal attacks were indeed useless against the immortal body of a Phoenix. But the separation ability of Yamato was definitely not among them. Riser's feet had been cleaved directly by an attack carrying cutting power, completely separating them into 2 pieces from his body. If he hadn't had feet to begin with, that so-called immortality ability wouldn't have been able to make them grow back at all. By the same logic, if he lost his heart, or couldn't even keep his head. He. Kid, I really don't know if your family has something wrong with their brains, or if you were never clear-headed to begin with. Regardless, the guy who pushed you out here must be dying to see you dead, right? Otherwise, why would he think you could beat me? Levi lifted his foot and stomped down again, pressing Riser's head directly into the ground. The excruciating pain brought by this kick finally made Riser realize everything was real. The immortality ability of the Phoenix clan was not invincible. The moment he understood this, a system notification sounded in Levi's ear. Check in reward, Riser Phoenix, armament hockey. Claim. The reward instantly merged into Levi's body. The surface of his right foot, which was stepping on Riser, was immediately covered by a layer of black armament hockey, and he then kicked Riser in the face, sending him flying off the arena. If he had wanted to end it quickly, this fight would have been over long ago. But the mission wasn't to kill Riser, nor was it to completely defeat him. So, he couldn't let him lose too quickly. As for the question of killing him or not, it wasn't that important. After all, a guy like this would only shrink away into self-isolation after losing. Compared to those, don't look down on the poor and the young, types, he was basically just trash. Killing him had no benefits. Not killing him had no downsides, and his family would still have to bring a large amount of chips to beg him to heal his feet. Besides, Levi could also tell that while Sears X hadn't said anything, he didn't actually want Riser, the 3rd son of the Phoenix clan, to die here. So Levi spared his life, waiting for his family to come and pay to buy his feet back later. Levi finished up, and the area below the stage went quiet again. No one spoke. His gaze swept over them. These guys didn't even have the guts to meet his eyes. Even the old head of the Phoenix clan understood the other party's attitude from Searsex's reaction by now. It was clearly indulgence toward Levi. At this point, he completely abandoned the idea of going head to head with Levi. He couldn't beat him, and his backer didn't care, so he could only try to befriend him later and bring enough chips to heal Riser's injuries. Everyone remained silent. Searsex had originally intended to walk out and announce Levi as the winner. But just at this moment, the Seatree clan head suddenly stood up. Lord Searsex, Lord Levi, previously, Lady Seraphal said some things. This match actually still has a second half that hasn't been finished. As soon as the Seatree clan had finished speaking, Seraphal floated directly onto the arena. She circled Levi several times, looking him up and down thoroughly. On the surface, it looked like pure curiosity, but in reality, every glance was scrutinized very carefully. She confirmed one thing: Levi was indeed a high-class devil, but his physical attributes far exceeded the normal high-class standard. After confirming this, her signature smile returned to her face, and she spoke. Yes, I said before that the winner of this match, the Seatree clan head, can hand over Sona's engagement. Immediately after. I don't want to be separated from Sona, so my engagement has to be tied together with hers. What? As soon as these words came out, not only were the devils below stunned, but even Searsex and Ajuka were dumbfounded. Only Levi was completely unfazed. Even now, he still felt that this was all Searsex's doing. He mused that Searsex definitely didn't want his sister bound by an engagement, but couldn't easily call it off directly, so he had deliberately set up this drama. He had even guessed long ago that someone would come to stir things up at this critical juncture. He just hadn't expected the person to jump out to be Seraphal. However, if you want to marry me, you certainly have to let me see if you have the ability first. After saying this, Seraphal had confirmed that Levi did not have Satan-class combat power. She calculated that as long as Levi wasn't a Satan class, there was no way he could sign Graphia into the house of Lucifer as a servant. So she smiled and looked at Levi. I won't bully you either. How about this? You bring all your servants and fight me. Neither side is allowed to hold back. If I win, both engagements are voided. If you win, then both engagements are yours. Seraphal felt that she was guaranteed to win. And Levi turned his head to look at Searsex. That guy was motionless, showing absolutely no reaction. Did this mean he was consenting? No holding back, letting him bring all his servants to fight Seraphal alone. Searsex should know what level his servants were at. So this time, he had calculated Seraphal into it too. But since he wasn't reacting, there was nothing he could do. After all, his check-in targets already included Sona and Seraphal. Thinking of this, Levi stared at Seraphal and nodded slowly. Fine, I accept. Levi stood in the center of the hall and drew Yamato. The blade slashed across in the void, a rift opened, and he stepped inside. At this gathering, he had found a total of 5 check-in targets. The one with Saraorg Bale could wait until the party ended. Riser's was already done. The remaining 3 were Rias, Sona, and Seraphal. Rias and Sona's check-in missions were both tied to their engagements. Getting their engagements first was equivalent to holding the initiative in his own hands. As for Seraphal, the mission popped up by the system was, defeat Seraphal Seatree. This mission was originally quite difficult. Seraphal's strength was right there. She was on the same level as Graphia, a Satan-class opponent that anyone would find troublesome. But the other party had made a request herself. To solo Levi's entire team. Once this condition was set, the difficulty plummeted. Levi knew very well in his heart. My servants are not weak at all. He returned to the house of Lucifer Castle and ran into Graphia. Call everyone to the main hall. Graphia nodded and turned to make arrangements. Kuroka was curled up on the sofa, and seeing Levi return and summon everyone, she couldn't help but tilt her head. What's wrong, Levi-sama? Did something happen? Sharon stood beside Kuroka, and Levi first glanced at her. Kuroka, how has Sharon been training lately? We are going to have a rating game soon. Sakura is being guided by Tiamat, and her use of the void attribute is on the right track, so she'll be fine with the team. What about Sharon? I'm fine too. Sharon puffed out her cheeks, looking unconvinced. Levi helplessly rubbed the back of his head. Only if you've truly mastered Senjutsu will that count. I've already mastered it. Sharon answered resolutely. Kuroka reached out and patted her head, nodding slightly at Levi. Sharon has made great progress. Although the Senjutsu she has mastered is basically oriented toward support, if she cooperates with Sakura, relying on the sensory ability of Senjutsu, she can also be quite useful for Sakura's magic. Since Kuroka said so, Levi didn't ask any more questions. The others in the team had different reactions upon hearing that Levi's first rating game was coming up soon. Artoria and Graphia were the calmest. Artoria's strength wasn't bad when she was still a heroic spirit, and now that she had become a devil and laid down the sword of selection, her strength was shooting up almost visibly. She was already firmly standing at the Satan class level. As for Graphia, honestly, Levi felt that even if he let Graphia solo the other side in this rating game, she could fight to a draw. Tiamat, Graphia, and Seraphal, the three of them were all on the same level. Ingvild and Kuroka, however, were still a breath away from Satan class, and both of them were burning with high fighting spirit this time. As for Sakura and Sharon, they were purely in the beginner category. Their potential hadn't been fully revealed yet, and Levi hadn't had the time to find a sacred gear for Sakura. So this time, they would just be support followers, and incidentally, open their eyes to the world. That's settled then, everyone is going in this time. As for tactics, there's nothing special to arrange. When the time comes, Sakura and Sharon will hide in the imaginary space, responsible for Senjutsu support and recovery. As for the others, just cooperate simply, like in our usual training, and that should be about it. Hearing Levi say this, Tiamat couldn't help but ask. Levi, is the opponent this week? Levi first nodded, then shook his head. The opponent is Seraphal, the current Satan Leviathan. Huh. As soon as these words came out, several people's eyes widened sharply. Graphia's brows also furrowed. Levi-sama, if it's her team, there are indeed many things that need to be handled with care. Seeing Graphia and the others suddenly tense up, Levi smiled. If it were her team, but unfortunately, this time she initiated the trouble, and even wants to solo our entire team by herself. As soon as Levi said this, Tiamat's expression immediately collapsed. Artoria didn't change much. This knight had about the same attitude regardless of who the opponent was. Besides, having been with Levi for so long, she had also figured out this man's style. If you can gang up on someone, never go one-on-one. Since she had already joined the group, Artoria was slowly learning to adapt to Levi's way of fighting. Whether it was because she had laid down the burden of being a king, Levi always felt that Artoria was becoming more and more human. As one of the three cores of Levi's servants, and also his wife, Graphia's brows knit even tighter. Seraphal, how long has it been since we last met, and she's become this arrogant? By the time Seraphal realized that things had gone horribly wrong, it was already too late. Seerzex and Ajuka told her that Levi's servants included Graphia and Tiamat, and she started to panic. After all, she wasn't even sure she could win one-on-one against Graphia. If Graphia and Tiamat teamed up for a 2-on-1, she would definitely get beaten to the point where she wouldn't even know which way was up. Wait, that's not right. Isn't Levi only a high-class devil? How is he able to take Graphia and Tiamat as his servants? Seraphal's head was filled with question marks. Seerzex and Ajuka couldn't explain Levi's devil trigger either. After being stunned for a good while, Seerzex finally spoke. Levi, he is different from others. Seraphal stared at Seerzex, blinked, and nodded expressionlessly. Let's put it this way. you're saying that even though Levi is a high-class devil, he has a way to sign Satan-class servants, right? From a certain perspective, even Ajuka, who was renowned in the underworld for his technical expertise, couldn't figure out how Levi's devil trigger worked. That was why his explanation had been so hesitant. Sarah Fall had clearly misunderstood. If that's the case, this is a rating game after all. In other words, as long as I take out Levi, this high-class devil, won't that iron wall of Graphia and Tiamat working together be broken? Sarah Fall suddenly felt that this might actually be a good thing. A delusion popped into her mind. As long as I can. So, she gave Sirzex and Ajuka a thumbs up, and before they could even react, she entered the arena. Levi took his servants and walked into the dimensional arena prepared specifically for this rating game. The other devils had originally thought they were just coming to see a marriage engagement decision, but they hadn't expected to witness an official rating game in person. However, the protagonists of this duel were the sole heir of the House of Lucifer and the current Satan Leviathan, so the atmosphere was ignited instantly. Sirzex knew clearly that Seraphal had dragged him into this mess. But with things having reached this point, he could only brace himself, step forward, and announce the rules. The battlefield this time was randomly selected. Although it doesn't look intuitive, it is indeed an ocean field. For Leviathan, this might offer a bit of home field advantage, but it will still come down to the true strength of both sides. The condition for victory is for either Seraphal or Levi to completely withdraw from the battlefield. Then, the match begins. As Levi walked into the water battlefield with his servants, Ophus's voice suddenly rang in his ears. Only he could hear that voice. He knew Ophus was hiding nearby, but with her abilities, as long as she didn't want to be seen, even Sirzex and Ajuka couldn't detect her presence. Kill her? Ophus asked. Upon hearing her voice, Levi's heart couldn't help but skip a few beats. But he quickly suppressed his emotions and refused using their unique way of communicating. No need. This is our first rating game, so just watch from the sidelines. We will win this beautifully. Oh. Ophus replied, then cut off the connection. Levi sensed that she had stopped speaking, let out a breath, and readjusted his state. Sakura, you and Sharon go hide first. Understood. This water battlefield was an isolated island surrounded by a vast ocean. There was seawater on all sides. For a Satan bearing the title of Leviathan, this battlefield was practically tailor-made. Even though Sona specialized in ice magic, she didn't have much of an advantage in this environment. But Levi wasn't panicked in the slightest. He turned his head and looked at Ingvild. Ingvild, this round, it might be your turn to shine. Ingvild nodded with a smile. She walked to Levi's side, closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and began to sing softly. Her total magical power, by human standards, had long since surpassed the Satan class. As the singing began, 6 pairs, a full 12 wings, burst out from behind her. Artoria and Tiamat, both possessing draconic attributes, felt the power within them surging out wildly as if a dam had burst. Then, the ocean seemed to receive a command. As Ingvild's figure rose higher, giant waves from all directions surged toward the island. 9 massive dragon heads, formed entirely from seawater, emerged from the waves. The magical characteristic of Satan Leviathan, known as the Ouroboros dragon, was capable of controlling the oceans of the human world and causing great chaos. But Ingvild combined this characteristic with her Longinus, the final Emerald Sea Aria. The result was that she could freely manipulate everything related to the concept of the sea, with an overwhelming level of control. Seraph's specialty was ice magic. Even if she truly possessed the bloodline of Leviathan, she stood no chance of competing with Ingvild in controlling the sea. Ingvild's talent in this aspect was simply innate. It was possible that her ability to control the ocean had already surpassed the original Leviathan. The 9 water dragons opened their mouths and roared simultaneously, shooting water tornadoes from their mouths. 9 forces swept fiercely toward the same location. Locked on. Levi drew Yamato and glanced at Graphia and Kuroka beside him. Let's go. Understood, Lord Levi. The devils watching outside the arena were all dumbfounded. Their wide open mouths couldn't close for a long time. After a while, the head of the Sea-Tree clan was the first to speak, his voice a bit heavy. If I'm not mistaken, that is the magical characteristic of the former Satan Leviathan, but to push this power to such an extent, and those 12 wings behind her. Satan. Aside from that word, the devils present couldn't come up with any other term. Originally, they thought that with the decline of the 4 great Satan's clans, the house of Lucifer producing a monster like Levi was already absurd enough. Now it seemed that the one from the Leviathan clan wasn't someone to be trifled with either. Moreover, now that the system of the 4 great Satans had been abolished, this generation's Leviathan had actually become a servant of Lucifer. A Leviathan like that, plus the super genius that the Lucifuge clan only produced once every millennium, Graphia Lucifuge. The devils of the reformist faction had originally thought that the old Satan faction was long finished. But at this moment, they had to re-evaluate this faction that had lost to them in the war back then. Inside the arena, Seraphal looked at the scene outside, her eyes nearly popping out. Is this a joke? As the 9 water tornadoes came crashing down, covering the sky, Seraphal suddenly spread her arms. A magic circle burst open beneath her feet, engraved with the emblem of the Sea-Tree clan. Terrifying cold air surged from her body, pushing out in all directions like a tide. The 9 water tornadoes instantly froze into ice pillars. The ground froze, and the trees fell to both sides as Seraphal pushed with her hands. Even the 9 giant dragon heads and the ocean within this dimensional space were all frozen by her. She was, after all, the Satan who inherited the name Leviathan. She knew very well that Leviathan could only unleash truly terrifying combat power when holding a weapon. If empty-handed, her strength would be significantly discounted. The next second, Seraphal's gaze suddenly turned sharp. She saw it. Levi, Graphia, and a black-haired woman with cat ears were charging toward her. Graphia is too troublesome, and that cat demon, it feels like she's about at the level of an ultimate class devil, just a thin veil away from the Satan class. Seraphal's gaze swept over those two and finally locked directly onto Levi. No, this guy's servants are too strong. Graphia, Tiamat, and that Satan from the Leviathan clan from just now. If that cat also knows Senjutsu, I won't be able to take them down in a short time. If I really go head to head with this group of servants, even I would probably just end up getting beaten. However, this is a rating game, not a life or death battle. As soon as she finished speaking, Graphia's figure suddenly flashed within a circle of blue magic circles. She appeared beside Seraphal, clenched her right hand, gathered magic into a ball of light, and smashed it down toward Seraphal's head. Crack! The ice shattered, and shards flew everywhere. What had been shattered was just a clone made of ice by Seraphal. Kuroka sensed something wrong and immediately became alert. She knew she was the weakest one here, but her senjutsu perception was strong enough, so, I'm not that easy to use as a breakthrough point. Kuroka thought that Seraphal had bypassed Graphia to come after her. But as soon as her perception spread out, she realized that Seraphal's target wasn't her at all, but. Sorry, but I'll take the victory. Seraphal flashed directly in front of Levi. She drew that magical girl wand with her right hand and swung it down at Levi's head. She knew Levi was only at the level of a high-class devil, so she specifically held back some strength. And then, Seraphal's sure-hit attack was easily blocked by Levi using the unsheathed Yamato. He didn't even draw the blade. How is this possible? Seraphal was completely stunned. She had obviously held back her strength in that attack, but even so, a normal high-class devil shouldn't have been able to block it at all. Just while she was stunned, dark blue magic energy burst out from Levi, expanding outward as if it had substance. When he blocked Seraphal's attack earlier, Levi's hands had already transformed into his devil trigger form. Now, the horns on his head, the markings on his body, and that black steel mask were all solidifying bit by bit within the surging dark blue magic energy. Terrifying magic energy exploded instantly, and with a force of his hands, Levi pushed Seraphal away entirely. Seraphal still had her eyes wide open, looking in shock at Levi, who had entered his devil trigger form. At this moment, Levi spoke slowly. It seems I really have been looked down upon. You want to use me as a breakthrough point, huh? He held the scabbard with one hand and gripped the hilt of Yamato with the other, slowly drawing the blade out a bit. I really don't understand where you get the confidence to think that I'm weak. But if you've pinned your hopes on this, then you've already lost, Seraphal. Seeing Levi's devil trigger form, the devils of the reformist faction were all struck dumb. Originally, they had plenty of little schemes in their minds. A high-class devil, flying the flag of Lucifer, having used unknown methods to recruit so many core members of the old Satan faction, how could they not have had any thoughts? But those thoughts all vanished the instant they saw Levi enter his devil trigger form. A high-class devil capable of reincarnating as a Satan class. There's no such thing. The real reason Levi Lucifer could reincarnate Satan class devils was, he himself was Satan class. And a Satan class who could force back Seraphal, at that. After knowing this, who would dare to have any little schemes? They could all see that the relationship between Searsex and Levi was exceptionally close. That's the end of part 3 and 4. Part 5 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.